Yes.
Okay, great. Javon, are you ready?
Ready, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, Melissa, go ahead and ask Miriam to start. Melissa, let me know.
Yes, just one moment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, still waiting, just one moment.
Okay.
I'm still waiting, just one moment.
Okay.
Miriam, if you could hear this, if you could confirm if we're good or not.
We're good, Melissa.
Okay.
Okay, we'll begin. Good evening. I'd like to call the San Bruno City Council meeting of May the 26th, 2020 to order. May I please have roll call, City Clerk?
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Mason?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Vice Mayor Salazar?
Here.
Mayor Medina?
Here. If I'd be very honored if Joanne would lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge of allegiance to the flag
The
of
flag.
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joanne. Public comments for items not on the agenda. It is the council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law. Turn it over to you, Melissa.
We do have two hands raised. The first is Stephen Seymour. Just one moment. Stephen, can you hear us?
Hi, it's Sandra Perez Vargas. I can hear you.
Hi, Sandra.
How are you doing?
Working.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Great. Okay, I have just a couple suggestions. I've been spending a lot of time talking to merchants on San Mateo Avenue, and they're kind of excited about what Redwood City and the cities around us are doing, having outdoor seating for restaurants and coffee shops so they can safe distance and still, bring in more business. So that's one. Another thing, since we have such a budget crisis, I noticed that the Senior Center newsletter arrived and it's being printed in colored ink. I think that's much more expensive than black ink. So, when you're looking to cut, this might be like the lowest hanging fruit to change that. And I also am making a special request. Maybe you guys can wave a magic wand. I would love, as many other people would love to see, is the pride flag flying over City Hall this June. We all need to be uplifted in one way or another, and this will be a great time for us to show unity with our LGBTQ community. And my last comment is about the Zoom meetings. I think it's great that we don't have to leave our houses to go to a meeting. We don't have to get in the car, waste gas, pollute our environment. So I'm hoping it is seriously considered, since we know these meetings work now, we're using them, that we continue to use them long after this virus is gone. As we saw with the school board meeting last week, when I've gone, there's a handful of people, maybe 3-4 parents and my husband and myself, and we don't even have parents in the school district. They had over 200 people on Zoom. So I think this is a way to go. I mean, we've been asking for these type of services in the past. Now we know that they work so well. Let's keep the participation going and continue to use technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Okay, one moment. And the next person is Jeffrey Tong. Jeffrey, just one moment. We're bringing you in the room. Jeffrey, I'm trying to unmute you. It's not unmuting. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Am I
Jeff-
unmuted?
Jeffrey, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Mr. Mayor and City Council members, except for City Park, San Bruno has no recreational sites within the city limits. But there's two major sites which a lot of people are visiting during this COVID-19 crackdown, and they're adjacent to but outside San Bruno city limits. And they are Sweeney Ridge and Milagro Ridge. Between these sites sit Skyline College, and connecting Milagro and Sweeney is College Road. So I'm petitioning the City Council to allow our Colinas Costeras, the National Wildlife Federation's community wildlife habitat, to adopt College Road. This will be a community building project that will remove invasive and plant native plants, give neighbors practical hands-on skills to restore wildlife habitat on their own property and motivate them to care for their community. With a budget deficit, this will help the city in maintaining public properties just by using volunteer services. So I ask that City Council put it on the next agenda to approve, and the details have been emailed to the City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay, just one moment. The next hand up is Tim. Just one moment while we bring you in the room. Hi, Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just want to bring up a couple of things concern. One main thing is the Florida Park, the maintenance, the upkeep of it. It is currently not looking well maintained at the time, and the weeds are getting kind of high and dry, making it a fire hazard. And we're coming up in summertime here, and especially in this heat that's going on right now, it's gonna, there's plenty of fuel for a fire to happen right now. So and this upkeep looks like nobody's really attending it at this time, and also, what is the plan? It'd be great to see it being opened up and being used. I mean, I know if we're not going to build the park that was planned, it could be used right now for, just for people to go out there and stretch and hang out, socially distance themselves and have fun. So I'd like to know what the plan is and what the plan is for the upkeep of it. I just don't see it being maintained well right now. And one other thing I'd like to say is we're very grateful of the work that's going on in our neighborhood right now. The sewer replacement, this water replacement, and the ADA ramps that have been put in. They look really good. All the contractors that are involved have been doing a great job with working with the community, and it looks great. And we're looking forward to the streets being paved soon. So we just want to be, say thank you, and yeah, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, and then it looks like we have one more hand up, and that's Oros Harmon. Just one moment. Hi, Oros, can you hear us?
Hey, good evening. Yes, I can.
Whenever you're ready.
I just wanted to say really quickly that I was a signatory on Jeffrey's petition for the Colinas Casteras adoption of College Road. I think anything we do that beautifies the city and installs native plants rather than invasives is to be encouraged. And that linkage up there, I've hiked in both those regions. They're beautiful, and linking them up for habitat would be great. I was also going to remark really quickly that as a member of one of our city's Brown Act bodies myself, I am totally in agreement with Sandra that encouraging online participation is a great idea, even after all this is over. We know that required in-person attendance at these types of public meetings causes us to get an unrepresentative sampling of the population, that we get people who are older, richer, and whiter than the actual population of our city because of that kind of requirement. And there's lots of research on that topic. There's a really wonderful book called Neighborhood Defenders, which you can find. And I happen to know that Kevin Mullen, our assemblyman, has been working on some Brown Act modernization ideas. I think that bill has been shelved for this year because of the crisis, but I'm hoping it will come back by the, the crisis obviously illustrates the reasons made it very difficult to hold meetings about anything but the sort of immediate pressing budget problems. But I hope folks will talk with him and be supportive of that as that comes back. Did you also want to?
Yeah, I'll just comment really briefly. Hi, this is Plymouth Ansberg, also here. I just wanted to speak up in support of Sandra's comments about making outdoor space available to some of our restaurants on San Mateo Ave as they open back up. I've been hearing about a lot of other cities doing that, and it seems like it's been, really popular and effective. And I, would at this point not be willing to visit a restaurant if I had to dine inside, but given that, summer is coming up and the weather is going to be nice, dining outside would be a really great option. So we should look at that. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Rose. Thank you, Plymouth. City Clerk, do we have any others?
Nope, that was it. That was our last person.
Okay, let's move on to item 4, please. Announcements. Sorry. Item A. Again, we are going to bring this up through this census topic time that we have available to us, but to fill out your 2020 census. As you know, it only comes around once every 10 years. Then ensures San Bruno will receive our share of federal funds for parks, schools, and other programs. And you can go ahead and visit my2020census.gov to fill out today. Item B, receive, report, and review status of local emergency related to repairs to Crestmore Canyon and continuing declaration of local emergency. Director Tan.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, Public Works Director Jimmy Tan. In regards to the Crestmore Canyon project, I don't have any new information to share this council meeting. The agreement to repave the westbound lane of San Bruno Avenue has been routed to internal staff for execution. And once that agreement is executed, the city will receive the bonds and insurance and coordinate with the contractor to schedule the work. So currently it's anticipated that the paving work will be completed sometime in June. So this concludes my quick presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mayor Medina, you're muted.
That doesn't help. Sorry. I didn't see any hands. What I was saying, I didn't see any hands from my colleagues. So thank you, Director Tan. We'll move on to item C, receive update on COVID-19 response efforts. City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, members at home. A few of us here are in the Senior Center, 6 feet apart, and ready to give you another update on COVID-19. So if everyone can see the PowerPoint, we will begin.
Not yet.
Now,
Not yet.
share the screen. We have to share the screen. 1 second.
Javon, do you want me to pull it up?
Sure, we're getting it right now. Actually, 1 second, we will share the screen.
We can see it now.
That's our
This is the,
It's our 200 slide budget presentation. We're going to pull up the one for Crestmore. It's a lot shorter. For COVID. Okay, are we good now? Okay, provide an update to council and the general public. Our agenda, quick 5 items. We want to give you an update. We've been presenting the county stats every meeting, and so we want to do that again. We'll talk a little bit about the modification to the order, a number of resources that we want to highlight again. And then last time we had a question on enforcement of various parking regulations and other police enforcement. And so during this presentation, our police chief, Ryan Johansson, will join me. So a little information on statistics in the county. When we pulled these figures, as of May 25th, there were 1,904 positive cases, 82 deaths. What you'll see on the upper right-hand side is the deaths are at this point split equally between males and females, and the age group hasn't changed with the vast majority, all but one of the deaths being of individuals 50 years or older. But the positive cases, which is that portion of the screen on the bottom left that has cases by age group, the important point that we've noted before, but I wanted to highlight again, is COVID-19, as far as confirmed cases within our community, within our county, is affecting every age group. And so that's important for us to realize. For those of you that want these stats, I didn't make them up. They are on the county's homepage. From the county's homepage, you can link to the county health department and access these, and there's a robust data set available. As far as the number of cases, the last figure that was released by jurisdiction, there have been a total of 86 confirmed cases of COVID-19 since the data has been tracked within the city of San Bruno. That is 5% of the total cases in the county. By population, we are 6% of the county's population. And so it is relatively proportional. The number of positive cases that we have is relatively proportional to our population size that we see throughout the county. Next is an excerpt from the phase 2 order from our county health officer. I know it's a lot of words, but I wanted to provide this excerpt because it's important. We are reopening society, and we are at what the state has termed early phase 2. And businesses are reopening, and people can travel further from their home than they could before. And on the next slide, we'll talk about that. But this is important. And what it says is progress on COVID-19 indicators related to hospital utilization and capacity makes it appropriate at this time to allow certain additional businesses and activities to resume with conditions. But there's a but, and the but is from our county health officer. But I want to remind everyone that these modifications to the shelter in place are not being made because it is safe to go out and about. The virus continues to circulate in our community, and this increase in interactions among people is likely to spread the virus at a higher rate. And so I think we've all heard that in the national news, and we've heard that in the local media, but it's being repeated by our county health officer, really as a reminder that the shelter in place and the restrictions on mobility were all an effort to lower the positivity rate. We will not, as a society, be back to our normal until there is a vaccine, a significant ramp up in testing, or a successful treatment plan for COVID-19. Neither of those three are on the immediate horizon, but we are starting to reopen our society with conditions, and it's appropriate that we all take the appropriate precautions. Sorry. Additional restrictions, just a quick note, there are so many, we just wanted to highlight a few. Certain businesses are now allowed to operate with curbside pickup. And so what we know is that our mall, Tan Fran Mall, the interior stores were not allowed to reopen in stage 2, early phase, but now they are allowed to reopen with certain conditions. And some of those is that the products must be ordered in advance. That does not mean before you arrive. What it means is that you cannot go into the mall to pick out or order the product. You can arrive at the mall and order in your car, but you cannot essentially place that order in person with staff from that retail store. And social distancing requirements must be adhered to, and you must wear a face covering. Construction protocols were adjusted for large and small projects, and it removed the prohibition against traveling for recreation within 10 miles. You may recall first the limit was you cannot leave your house to recreate. Then it was you could leave your house to recreate within 5 miles and then 10 miles. And now that 10-mile limit has been lifted. Friendly reminder, here in the city of San Bruno, our public pools are continue to be closed, athletic fields, play structures, dog parks, public restrooms, barbecues, picnic areas, and sport courts. And so we continue to put out this information on various social media platforms and through our written communications and through Channel 1. Want to highlight, we talked about at our 2 prior meetings that a number of small business assistance efforts were underway, and we celebrated a number of them. One of the things that was mentioned that is now up and running was small business recovery and assistance, essentially technical assistance, funded by the San Bruno Community Foundation, but being really led by the Chamber of Commerce and the Bay Area Entrepreneurial Center, a Skyline College that is housed right in our downtown on San Mateo Avenue. And so that is up, that's running. It offers no cost one-on-one expert advice, assistance, and workshops, and online resources, an important and a very needed tool because navigating all of the assistance and financial information that is out there, we know is a challenge for our small businesses, and we're glad that the San Bruno Community Foundation stepped up and partnered with our Chamber of Commerce and the Bay Area Entrepreneurial Center to fund this important effort. And so the email addresses are on the screen. Contact the Chamber or contact the Entrepreneurial Center for information and to sign up. Another important note is COVID-19 testing. This is really good news. The public may remember that we have been saying that there would be a relaxation of the requirements to be tested. And so now we are here. Free testing is available to anyone in our community. You do not need a doctor's note. You do not need a symptom. You do not need medical insurance. It is again being provided by Verily, which is a Google company that the county partnered with to provide free testing for San Mateo County. They have a project baseline, and so there's a website on the screen, projectbaseline.com/study/COVID-19. It is important for everyone in our community to know that this is not being offered everywhere. This is a special partnership between Verily and San Mateo County to offer tests to anyone that wants it within our county and within our city. And it's a project baseline, and they really are collecting data because they know that data is the way where we can really find out what's going on and what's the true positivity level in our community, and we have to ramp up testing. Nationally, tests are not available in every community, but it is available here due to the strong partnerships with Google and the county. Also, testing is no longer only available at the San Mateo County Event Center. Testing locations for this free testing is now in East Palo Alto and in Daly City. It will be in San Mateo on Mondays and Tuesdays, Daly City on Wednesday and Thursdays, East Palo Alto on Friday and Saturday, and I think everyone is resting on Sunday. But the times are there. This information is on the city's website, and it can be accessed in various ways, and we'll talk about that. Support. We wanted to do a reminder that sadness, depression, and feeling anxiety around this time, everything in our community, everything in our society appears to have been upended. And mental challenges are real and they're okay. And we wanted to provide 3 resources to the community that are watching this presentation tonight. One is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that is 1-800-273-8255. The other resource is the California Mental Health Peer Support. It's a 24-hour hotline for peer support. That number is 1-855-845-7415. And then the next resource, because we know domestic violence has had a increase, not just in our county, in our city, but nationally during this time. And there's a 24-hour hotline for that, 1-800-300-1080. The web addresses are there, and this information is being pushed out to the community on our various social media platforms. So with that, the last update that I'll provide before we have the police chief is on our Great Plates program. I talked about this 2 weeks ago at our last meeting, but it is available for anyone 65 or older. There are a number of criteria, but it does provide free meals delivered to anyone in our community that meets the criteria. So you must be 65, you must live alone or with one other eligible adult. You must not receive meals from any other federal or state program. And you do not have family, friends, or another caregiver that can help prepare meals. And you're unable to shop for meals, and you meet the income criteria, which is having less than $74,900 for a single person. So there are criteria, but we know that this will help a portion of our community. It is funded by the state, and it is available statewide, hence the criteria to spread the dollars where they are most needed. But our senior center and our staff at our senior center have been passing this information out, and someone on the comments earlier mentioned our senior center newsletter, and so this information will be disseminated through that mechanism as well. Oh, okay, so with that, Ryan, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, City Manager Grogan, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of council, and our community listening at home. I promise to be brief, but I know there was a question last time posed by a council member about what parking enforcement the police department is engaging in under the shelter in place order and what we are not. And so take a brief opportunity here to just clarify that a little bit. Essentially, the police department has stood up parking enforcement again, but only for violations that pertain to a clear public safety concern. Examples would be blocking the sidewalks, wrong way parking, obstructing red zones, of course, parking without a placard and disabled parking, any roadway obstructions or blocking of driveways, blocking of handicap access ramps, and other parking violations that would be deemed to be hazards to the public. We are not enforcing most other parking laws. This includes timed parking under the belief that it conflicts with the shelter in place order to have people coming out of their homes simply to move cars on a regular basis to avoid citation. So this includes our 72-hour violations as well as the time parking zones downtown. Those are currently still not being enforced in an effort to support the shelter in place orders and encourage people to stay home and stay healthy. Also, most registration-related offenses are not being enforced still. This was at a specific request that went out to all law enforcement entities in the state from the California Department of Motor Vehicles. This is because obviously for a long period of time, all of their field offices were closed and only recently have a couple of them reopened. And they're way behind in processing registration renewals and even clearing of suspended registrations. And so we are currently not enforcing those violations either. And also street sweeping would be another one that we are not currently enforcing. I'll stress that these policies are being continuously reevaluated based on the continuous revisions that we're seeing to the shelter-in-place order. And I would expect in the coming weeks to see more regular parking enforcement continually being stood up. If we can move to the next slide. Just briefly touching on blocking sidewalks, because there have been camps kind of on both sides of the equation here. So those that are very pleased to see the increase in enforcement of this violation to add access for our community, and those who are not so happy with what have been parking habits over a long period of time that they're now receiving citations for. And so I just want to be clear that there's no question that the state has spoken and it has been upheld that blocking the sidewalk, hanging over the sidewalk in any way, shape, or form with a vehicle creates a serious hazard or a potentially serious hazard for pedestrians. And this is not just in the event that they have to actually go into the street to get around a vehicle, but even if it forces them to go into the sloped portion of a driveway, this can be really dangerous for folks using wheelchairs, walkers, canes, strollers, anything really with wheels that has to navigate down that side slope. It runs the risk of pushing them into the street. And this is especially dangerous in much of San Bruno where our streets are so narrow. And vehicles coming down the roadway with vehicles parked on both sides are not going to often see this pedestrian come into the roadway suddenly and prevents a really serious hazard. There's some obvious ADA concerns there as well, where these sidewalks are very clearly established to provide access to people, and us allowing that access to be obstructed is of concern. And so this is another reason for our enforcement. And I'll also just take a real brief moment here to describe that prior to beginning to enforce the blocking of sidewalks, we did a number of different warning campaigns, and we've issued in excess of 5,000 warning notices prior to beginning to issue citations in the past. And we went through another warning campaign more recently when we decided to stand up the blocked sidewalk enforcement during the shelter-in-place order. And this also was supported by a number of social media campaigns. We really made a very serious effort to get the word out that this was the new standard in San Bruno and the way we were going to do things in order to ensure access to the sidewalks. And so I'll be clear that blanketed enforcement is occurring at this point in time and will continue. So please, if you are in a situation where you're regularly blocking any portion of the sidewalk by parking your vehicle, even if the bulk of the vehicle is in your driveway, be aware that enforcement is occurring and will continue to occur, and you'll be looking at a $50 fine for that type of parking. And finally, just briefly touching on wrong way parking. This is another type of parking that has been met with some scrutiny in terms of our enforcement. I just want to be clear that this pertains to parking your vehicle on the left side of the roadway as opposed to the right side of the roadway, so that you're in effect facing the wrong direction on a roadway. And the simple reason why this is so much more dangerous than I think people tend to think is because it puts the driver's side of 99.9% of our vehicles here in the United States. It puts the driver on the curb side as you are then attempting to pull into traffic. Whenever you leave, your line of sight is severely obstructed and clearing the roadway ahead of you and even behind you before doing so. So this is really dangerous, again, even worsened on our narrower streets in San Bruno. It's especially dangerous for not only motorists, but for bicyclists and others that are legally using the roadway. And just pulling in and out is dangerous. In addition, we see a significant increase in parking-related minor collisions when parking on the left side of the roadway. And much of this is because we're simply not accustomed to parallel parking on the other side of the road. And when you add to that the fact that you're coming again from the driver's side of the car and trying to navigate that parking, it can be very difficult. Similar to with the sidewalk parking, prior to beginning to enforce wrong way parking last year, we did a major warning campaign, issued in excess of 3,000 warning notices for this violation before we ever issued a single citation. And also supported that with a tremendous amount of social media presence in order to explain what we were doing. And again, this as well is a violation that is now being enforced in a blanketed manner. And you can regularly expect that if you are parking this way, you are likely to receive a $50 citation. So that's what I've got for you this evening in by way of an update of our parking enforcement during the shelter-in-place order. I thank you very much for the time.
Okay, and the last thing I have is just a reminder that all of these presentations are on the city's website, so www.sanbruno.ca.gov/coronavirus. On that website, you can find a wealth of information, press releases, statements, and any contact information for any of the resources that we have provided at these presentations are again available on that website. Join our Facebook, join our Twitter, join our Instagram, stay informed. Thank you.
Thank you to City Manager and Police Chief. Any questions from my colleagues?
Through the chair.
Michael.
Just a quick question on, so Javon, as far as COVID-19 goes, we're still considered under a local emergency, correct? I mean, it wasn't advertised that way on the agenda, but that this is a report as a function of being under that state of emergency. Is that right?
Yes, that is true.
Okay. And is there any indication, or do we have any kind of indicators that would sort of tell us that we're getting close to being at the end of that emergency, or is that still so far down the road that we're not even considering it yet?
Yeah, so the end of the state of emergency will likely occur when we go back to a locally here, a stage 1, where most businesses are open and we have limited precautions. That may or may not be before there's a full vaccine, enhanced testing data on, what is the true positivity, because we have tested a large majority of our population. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we are several months away from that point. And I think we all have heard the talk about, frankly, what school looks like in the fall. And that decision will impact a lot. Because if the kids are not in school, that impacts the parents and really our ability as a society to go back to our prior norm or some version of that.
Okay. And then just one more procedural thing, both for this and for the Crestmore Canyon, shouldn't we be taking some sort of action every 14 days to extend it? Aren't we supposed to, like, or is it enough that we get the report and allow it to continue?
For the city attorney, it's enough for the report.
Okay. All right. Just making sure we're not missing anything. Thank you.
Linda.
Hey, thank you for the reports. I just had a couple of follow-up questions. For the COVID-19 numbers, should San Bruno be worried at all? I know that testing has recently become available pretty widely to anybody compared to before, and it's free. And the number jumped from, it was like in the 40s only about 3 weeks ago to now being in the high 80s. So I heard your percentages, but should we be worried that that number is climbing quickly?
So we regularly look at the statistics countywide. When it was at 40 and when it's at 80, the relative proportion of positivity that we see in San Bruno is in line with our share of the population. The truth of the matter is we do not have a robust data set on positivity or confirmed cases because we have not, until this point, frankly, even had testing available to everyone. And so as that number increases, and if we continue along this path where our relative positivity rate is in line with our population, that is what we should expect. And we should hope for it to be lower. I think an elevated level of concern would occur if we approach a point to where the percentage of positive cases in San Bruno are greatly more than our proportion to our population. Now, that is true in some cities in this county right now.
Yep.
That is not true here. As we get more data, we will know more. But where we are now and where we were then, we're in proportion to what we should expect.
Okay. And then another question, two more questions. One is, any idea about when hair salons will be allowed to open? This has been pretty consistent. The governor has said it's really up to the counties at this point. And I guess where are we with this?
So I should caution all of these statements by saying I am not an epidemiologist. And the city of San Bruno does not control that. The county health officer controls that. But what has been said is personal services and large group gatherings may be some of the last services to come back online. I think we had our governor note that this may have changed with more data, but it was a few weeks ago. They were able to trace the first confirmed case in California back to a nail salon. And that was one of the reasons why personal services were not being, or nail salons were not being allowed to open statewide. I think things will change as we get more data. Unfortunately, here locally, we don't control that.
Okay, great. And then just one last question for Chief Johansson. Thank you for that report. I had requested an update at the last meeting, so I really appreciate the details that you provided in the slides. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question to that, which are around the hours of enforcement. What has been kind of interesting has been a group of residents who have wanted enforcement for a long time. And now that enforcement is happening, now I'm getting a group of residents who are unhappy with the enforcement that's happening. And I understand that it's a very delicate balance. But the biggest complaint I've gotten from people who have gotten tickets has honestly been around the time. It's been, 2 people contacted me about tickets at midnight. We got one at 4:30 in the morning. And then social media posts have been kind of all over the place. And so I'm just curious to know if there are specific hours that enforcement's occurring, or it's just 24 hours.
No, it's an excellent question, and we deal with the same dilemma, right? This balance of enforcement and discretion. And there are no specific hours of enforcement. The reason for the somewhat off hours really just has to do with available resources. As we've talked about before, we are working very hard to restaff our parking enforcement division, but currently it is down a full-time. We have 2 full-time and 3 part-time CSOs in that division. And right now it's only 1 full-time CSO. So they typically work daytime to do the more normal hours enforcement. We're falling back on patrol officers and asking them to augment in order to keep enforcement up during this difficult time. And usually that means we're using those graveyard officers during that sort of slower time of the evening when they can actually get out and do parking enforcement, and it's not to the detriment of more essential policing activities. So we are attempting to make sure we're getting that key time of day where I know it's most important to get those cars moved when folks are actually using the sidewalks. But the goal here is that maybe by enforcing even through the evening, we're sending the message that you should never be parking blocking the sidewalk, and hopefully it creates the access we're looking for.
Okay, great. And through the mayor, I actually just had one more question.
Please.
The other issue I guess I should have mentioned earlier is that some of the houses, especially on the east side in particular, have really short driveways, built pre-ADA, right? And so that was one complaint that I did get, and I really didn't know how to answer it. Is I have a van, and the van goes into the sidewalk. Can they park parallel blocking the sidewalk? They have to park the car somewhere, right? And I really didn't know. I didn't know what to tell them, and it would be really great if you could provide some context there.
Sure. I mean, the law, right, to give the pat answer right away, the law reads that you cannot have the car with any portion of it hanging over any portion of the sidewalk. That being said, the way we've typically enforced this is that if we believe that without having to go down a downslope or leave the flat portion of the sidewalk, a wheelchair or a stroller can safely pass, we generally do not cite. Sometimes with these driveways, that's going to be impossible while still parking in your driveway. So What we have done in the past is that it is technically illegal to park in the street and block any driveway, but we do not proactively enforce blocked driveways. We do that on a complaint basis only. So if residents are blocking their own driveway, but not obstructing the sidewalk and parking completely in the street, that is not something that the police department enforces unless the resident themselves calls to say my driveway is blocked. So if that's the question you're asking, that would be safe.
That's great to know. Thank you. Thanks for the report.
Javon, City Manager.
Sure. So, Linda, that is a really good question. And earlier,
Jovan, we can't hear you.
okay, how about that? Perfect.
Yeah.
Linda, that's a good question. In 2019, we took a holistic look at parking, and one of the strategies that we came up with is to allow residents to take advantage of part of their private property to create a side driveway or even take out a portion of the grass. And council approved that a few months ago. In addition, as a part of that, specific to the example you raised of a long car and a short driveway that was built that way, we are also allowing property owners to inset their garage door to essentially extend the exterior parking strip. That was a sort of significant and sometimes unique change because most cities do not want you to make the garage smaller because then you may not have a car, be able to park a car in the garage. Part of the conversations we had is we sometimes have a double whammy, which is the exterior strip is too small and the driveway is too small. And so we felt that allowing them to compromise one of them, and it's typically cheaper to inset the garage door, would be beneficial. And so that is existing city policy. A homeowner can contact the Community and Economic Development Department and go through that process. And so, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, colleagues? Okay, if not, thank you to both for your update and the report. Appreciate it. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item under announcements and presentations. Item D, receive presentation on the highlights of a 2020 community survey. City Manager.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'll do the introduction. We have two people that will.
Jovan, we can't hear you again.
Javon.
Sorry, for some reason my microphone goes away. I'll do the introduction. We have two people on the virtual meeting that will provide the presentation. One is from the Lou Edwards Group, and another person is Brian Godby from Godby Research. Godby Research conducted a community priority survey for the city, and they will be providing those results. Lou Edwards, we entered into a contract with to help us with our community engagement efforts and to help us as a ballot consultant as we really looked at opportunities to attain more revenue as we look at our transient occupancy tax. And so I believe we have Jennifer from the Lou Edwards Group on the call. So Jennifer, if you are available, will you pop up?
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Hi there. So I will be very, very brief. I'm here with my colleague Brian Godby with Godby Research. As Jovan stated correctly just a moment ago, we are working with the city in a communications effort and community engagement effort to gauge our residents' thoughts on a multitude of different items. As Brian will discuss shortly, we entered into a community survey right as your community was beginning to shelter in place because of COVID-19. So quite a bit of our outreach and information gathering on your residents was their thoughts on the city's response to the crisis and how we may recover. So with that, I will introduce my friend and colleague and president of Godby Research, Brian Godby. Brian?
Thank you, Jennifer. I thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. I assume you can all see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So as you know, we were commissioned to conduct a survey in the city of San Bruno. The data collection method was online and via landline and cell phone. The landline, we completed 49 interviews. The cell phone was 80. The text invitations to an online survey were 446. And the email to online invitations were 50 completed interviews. As you can see, the online component has become the most significant portion of our interviewing. And if you were to look at the text responses via age group, you'd see that it's pretty representative, although just slightly underrepresented in the 65 plus category, which is why we still insist on doing landline calls, because that's how we make up the difference. The universe that we surveyed was likely November 2020 voters, and as a subset of that, we looked at likely November 2020 homeowner voters in the city of San Bruno. We were in the field from March 23rd through the 29th, so as Jennifer mentioned, it was just really after the shelter in place had gone into effect. So people were obviously at home. One of the things we've seen since the order began, and even through the surveys that we finished last weekend, is response rates are actually up. And it's because people are at home, obviously. And we haven't seen response rates like this in probably 15 years. So that's the only silver lining of the shelter in place that I can think of. Everything else is pretty difficult. The interview length for the phone component was 24 minutes. The overall sample size was 625 likely November 2020 voters, 354 likely November 2020 homeowner voters, giving us a margin of error of plus or minus 3.85 and 5.13% respectively. Jumping into the data, the first question that we asked, and we've been asking this since the first surveys that we've done after the shelter in place, was do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the job that state and local governments, we actually called out San Mateo County, City of San Bruno, and local school districts by name. And what you see here when you add the vary and somewhat together on both sides of the equation is people have an overwhelming positive view. This was obviously back in mid to late March, so it may have changed, but we were at 65% favorable versus 16% unfavorable. That's a positive to negative ratio of 4.0 to 1, which is, I think, great. Now, interestingly enough, as this has gone on, we've continued to ask this question, and we've done over 15 surveys since the middle of March, and we've seen this be as high as 75%. So as people became more comfortable, it's quite possible they became happier with the job that state and local governments are doing. We also asked a question that we brought back from when we were doing surveys during the Great Recession, and that was an opinion on the direction of the economy. Obviously, this tells us how positive or how what their forecast is looking forward. We were specifically interested in a 6-month time frame. You can see about a quarter, 27% said better, 18% said about the same, and not surprisingly, 44% in round numbers thought it might be worse. The next question was what their opinion was. Are they satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the city is doing to provide services? This is something we asked back in the 2019 survey as well. And while that was among likely November 29 voters, or 2019 voters, and this is likely November 2020 voters, there's this difference in the turnout there, but you can see that we've gone up. We're now at 64%. We were at 59%. Statistically speaking, it's not significant, but it's certainly the direction we would obviously like to see it go. The ratio of positive to negative is 3.2. It was 2.3. We asked an open-ended question about what is the most important problem facing the city. Not surprisingly, the COVID coronavirus crisis was the top set of responses at 14% in round numbers, followed closely by affordability of housing and cost of living, which, as we've surveyed repeatedly throughout San Mateo County before the crisis, were the top issues. And so they still are important, but just edged out by the current crisis. Switching gears a little bit to looking at perspectives on reinvestment priorities. The first question is support for a 14% transient occupancy tax, which is of course only paid by lodging guests, not by residents of San Bruno. And the way we look at this to determine feasibility is we add the definitely yes and the probably yes together, and you see that's at 62% support. This measure requires a simple majority, so we're significantly above that level. The next set of questions that we want to present this evening is a list of priorities with respect to storm drains. So the way this question was asked is we read each of these items that you see on the slide in a random order, and then asked the respondents if they thought it was extremely important, very important, somewhat important, not too important, or not at all important. We then create what you see here and what we call an intensity score, which is a slightly different way of looking at the data. It's these numbers right here. And the reason we do that is because if you were to just add percentages together, you could have something that was extremely important, 40, very important, 20, that's 60%, but you could have the opposite, 20% extremely important, 40% very important, that's 60% too, but it's clearly an entirely different 60%. So this intensity score is a much more nuanced way taking into effect all of the various responses to rank them. It's still important to look at the percentages, and you can see the ranges here with respect to the blue arrow. We also look at what we call tiers, and those are basically statistical groupings. So while there are numeric differences within a tier, they are basically tied from a statistical perspective. But it's still useful to look at the numeric differences as well, and obviously for ranking them. So in our top tier with respect to storm drain priorities, we have protecting clean drinking water. That's in a group by itself and is statistically different from the other items down the list. In our second tier, we have repairing deteriorating pipes and infrastructure to prevent system failures and sinkholes. The third item on the list is protecting water quality in local creeks and reservoirs and the bay. And then fourth is reducing pollutants flowing into the bay. And fifth is repairing and maintaining storm drains to prevent flooding, erosion, and water pollution. We've done a variety of storm water and storm drain surveys throughout the state, and this is a fairly typical ordering. It's not really different from other communities. So that's the summary for this evening, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. City Manager, do you want to conclude on anything, or should I open it to the council?
Sure. I'll give a quick wrap up. So one of the things that the City Council asked us to look into is a TOT measure. And so that is continues to be on staff's work plan. And we anticipate bringing forward everything the City Council needs to make a decision on that and putting that question to the voters in June. And so I'm sorry, in July, because it is due to the county in August. And so this survey was a part of that effort. We wanted to provide you with the results of that and are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian and Jennifer. Any questions from my colleagues?
Mr. Mayor?
Marty.
Yes. Interesting. The data was fascinating. For the storm drain, it's nice to know that the public supports clean drinking water and safer pipes, but in the question, they didn't ask about, are they willing to financially support it by paying more? Is that something that would be coming down the road, or where are we leading with this?
We were looking for just their priorities at this stage. That could be something that would be a subject of a future survey.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Marty. Anything else from my colleagues? Not seeing any hands. Then again, want to thank everyone for their presentation, and we'll go ahead and move on to consent calendar.
Great, thank you.
I'm
Oh, wait.
going to stop the participant sharing of the screen. Just one moment.
Let's pause for a moment. I see Linda's hand is up now.
Oh,
Linda?
for consent. Sorry, for consent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Melissa, if you go ahead and read, and I'll please.
All items are considered routine or implement an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested.
Thank you. Are there any items we wish to have pulled for separate votes? I know there are two items I just wanted to make a comment and for me, but items to be pulled. Linda, you had your hand up, and then Marty.
5C, I just have a comment, and 5D, I'd request a separate vote.
Okay, a comment for 5D. I'm E and F, and that's just comments, and we'll still take it as a collective, and then Marty.
Those three are the ones I was interested in, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Linda, you said D?
And
yes.
D, yeah.
And that you wanted separate, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Okay, if I'm seeing no other hands, under item, we'll do E and F since it was just a comment, and then we'll do a motion, and then we'll come back to item D. On E, it's a resolution accepting the on-call striping contract as complete. The reason I was just making a comment is it was anticipated at $55,000 and it came in $22,000 under, which that means the Measure A funds will be returned back to that account for other usage. On item F, which is a resolution accepting the single audit report of federal awards, that ended on June 30th of 2019. That was just to point out to folks that in 18-19 cycle, which we've been audited for now, that was for grants that the city of San Bruno received, which were over $1 million. So some folks, are wondering, do we actually go out? Do we get grants? Do we apply for grants? And so those were the reasons for my comments. If there is nothing else with the exception of item D for comments, is there action from council?
Move to approve.
Oh, for 5C.
5C, you had a comment? Sure.
I just,
I'm sorry. Approve draft meeting minutes for the special and regular meetings of April 14th, 21st, 22nd, 28th, and May 8th and 12th, 2020. Linda.
Yeah, so for May 12th, I did send this to Melissa as well, but if we could just have the minutes clear on the public hearing section, because I believe you probably have to listen to it again, but from my recollection, there was a request whether we can separate the introduction of the ordinance as a vote, and then there would be a particular instruction to staff regarding delaying the increase. And I think the minutes aren't exactly clear on that. And so if I can ask Melissa just to listen to the recording again and then clarify that within the minutes, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So, okay, any actions on all items but D under consent?
I move that we approve the remainder of the consent calendar, excluding item D.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I second.
Second.
Okay, we have Salazar and Mason. Motion seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, we need a roll call.
Sorry, Melissa.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'll see the Zoom is getting so second nature. It's almost like we're doing the normal voting. Okay, let's go to item D, which is waive the second reading and adopt the ordinance enacting the 1.62% rate increase for Recology, San Bruno garbage and recycling services to be in effect July 1, 2020. Linda.
Great, thank you. So I know from the last two meetings that we've had Recology, I think that the response has pretty continuously been that this is part of their contract. So, so I have some questions for, I believe it's Kristen, and I see she's on the call on the Zoom. So I actually went to the contract and I have some questions around some of the obligations that Recology has, and I was hoping just to ask her about them.
Sure, I'm here.
Great. Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Hi, good. Thank you, Linda.
Good, good. So I wanted to ask around the recycling, education, and community outreach. It says here that the Recology would employ a recycling coordinator and that 50% of the actual and reasonable costs for the coordinator would be allocated to the city. Can you tell us a little bit about that and whether that's happening and what they're doing if it is?
Absolutely. Yes, we have always employed what used to be called a recycling coordinator and which is now called a waste zero specialist. And her name is Raina. Raina conducts waste audits for our commercial customers. She monitors our participation with AB 1826 and AB 341 to make sure commercial customers are compliant. And most recently, especially during this COVID, she has been doing Zoom recycling presentations with the schools. So we have allowed teachers, if they wanted to participate, they just had to ask her and she would do Zoom recycling presentations.
And that's been going on, I take it since 1998, I guess?
Yes, it has. It used to be, it started off with Tammy Del Benny and it has gone through about a handful of recycling coordinators. And we now have Raina.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask about the next section. There's grants. How many grants, or I guess what is the process for the Recology working with the city to obtain grants to promote recycling? And then it says here, by seeking grant opportunities, providing background data, and assisting in the writing and submittal of grant applications. Say in the last 5 or so years, how many grants have been applied for and have been actually received?
I would have to throw that back to the city finance director or the city manager if they're aware of exactly how many grants were received and how detailed we were involved. I can tell you that she, especially in this last year, to make use of her time while a lot of commercial customers were closed right now. That is one thing she just submitted about 2 weeks ago to the city of San Bruno, a couple of environmental grants that she thought the city would benefit from. So I can answer to that, but to the other piece about how many, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, I believe the city responded to me that in the last 2 years, it's been 0. So then going on to community relations under business, talks here about the contractor shall develop presentations to educate about and encourage commitment by the business community to recycle, reuse, and waste reduction. Business and commercial recycling shall be promoted by the development of a business recycling guide, the conducting of commercial waste evaluations, and the sponsorship of business recycling workshops. These efforts shall target proper disposal of hazardous waste, segregation of cardboard and mixed office paper, other recyclable materials in which commercially reasonable markets exist, and overall education on proper solid waste management. It goes on, there's a whole second part of it, but does this booklet exist, and what outreach and events has Recology had in the last couple of years, specifically for businesses?
Raina has developed, has updated, I would say, some commercial brochures that she hands out to the commercial customers. She's done a San Mateo Avenue specific walkthrough and handed out the brochures. It does talk specifically to recycling and the participation, and most recently organics participation. So that brochure is given out to commercial customers in response to outreach, that's when I was talking earlier about waste audits that she does for customers. So if she has customers with high garbage volumes specifically, she will offer them a waste audit as part of their subscription to their service, and she will look through their garbage, safely, and let them know about the percentage of each and how they can then defer some of that recyclable or organic material out of their garbage into the proper waste stream.
Okay, but no presentation.
She does presentations. Basically, her presentations are trainings. So she does a lot of trainings with janitorial staff, kitchen staff, and the such, but not an overall business presentation where we invite commercial customers to. It's even hard to get training conducted, quite honestly, because a lot of timing's always of the issue, but we do conduct trainings.
Okay, and then I know a lot of our schools have gardens. A couple of them do, and it does say in the contract that there would be maintenance of green waste composting piles to local nurseries, landscaping companies, schools, and youth service clubs. And I immediately think of not just the schools, but like the 4-H clubs. How has Recology partnered recently with those, not within this 45-day period, but prior to this 45-day period, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years with these clubs and schools?
If schools request compost, we can absolutely make that happen. They just have to call us up or email me and ask if they can get some compost for their gardens. I know St. Robert's has participated and we've given them some compost for their garden. In the 4-H, they kind of make, I believe that a lot of it, they make a lot of their own compost. And how we partner with them to assist is with debris boxes to help offload a lot of their animal byproducts, if you will. We help them in that way. And if they requested compost, we would deliver it to them as well.
Okay, and when was the last time that Recology let all of these parties know that this was available to them?
It might have been some time, so it is something we can look at promoting.
Okay, that would be great. The next part is the contractor shall make its staff available to tour schools and provide classroom educational programs, recycling.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, just a little pause. Sounds like we're going through there's some questions on the contract or on the rate. I'm just trying to figure out,
This was the last one, and it has to do with the Recology's requirement under the contract to our community.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Because we are being told that this increase is part of the contract, and I want to make sure that both sides are adhering to their bargain. Or their part of the contract.
Thank you for the explanation.
So this one says that the contractor shall also sponsor an annual cash for class recycling fundraiser. Now, I have not seen this. I'm curious to know when the last time this occurred was, and for which schools.
I don't have a specific date. It was a program that was in place some time ago, and that's back when there was a value to recycling. There is no longer that type of value. So we have done different programs with the schools in the past. They've done a poster contest in regards to recycling, and they have done a recycling challenge, if you will, in the classroom that gathered the most recycling got a pizza party. I don't have dates as to when those occurred, Linda, but those are things that have been done in the past for the schools.
Okay, so I think that the fact that this contract has been amended so many times and there are these provisions that are specifically to give back to the community, I want to make a couple of things clear. One is that when it has been mentioned that this contract hasn't been procured in over 20 years, a common response I get is they give back to the community. And I think it's important to know that they are required by the contract to give back to the community. And I would like to see in this next year, all of these items that are contractual obligations being adhered to. So if there can't be a cash for class recycling fundraiser, what is the alternative to that cash for class recycling fundraiser? I think it's important that all of our schools, both private, charter, Catholic, public, are aware that this is available to them to receive this free compost. And I really think that I go back to what I've said before. I think Recology has been excellent. I think that I'm very happy with the service at my own residence, but I do want to make sure that we've been in this contract for a very long time, and we should be receiving our part of the contract benefits as well. Outside of the regular payments that are made for by residents for their, daily garbage operation, the city is also in business with you. And I think this area under community relations really needs to be more robust. So with that said, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Marty.
Yes, thank you very much. I also agree. I'm satisfied with Recology's service. This is a very modest rate increase. Recology has a contractual right to it. If the council does not approve the increase, then either the council will have to pay for the increase or face potential legal consequences of breaching the contract. I believe that's accurate. If I could concur with our city attorney, please.
Mr. Zaffarano.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. Can you say that again?
Sure. Recology has a contractual right to this rate increase. And if the council chooses not to approve the rate increase, either the council will have to pay for that increase in compensation to the Recology, or Recology could pursue some legal challengers or lawsuit for breach of contract.
Councilmember Medina, those are both possibilities absent any sort of bilateral negotiation between the city and Recology regarding the deferral or other action regarding that increase.
Right. Thank you, city attorney. And the reason why I bring that up is I hear from our customers, our neighbors, that they are frustrated and questioning why does Recology every year come back with the rate increase, and it's because it's in their contract. So in the staff report, if I could have staff kind of quickly summarize why it gets complicated to try to delay the increase and to try to squeeze it into the 6 months, because it's in the staff report, and if they would do a lot better job than I would. So if they could please provide that.
What the councilman's saying is at the last meeting, just to give some background, last meeting was can they at least be asked, right? Can even though it was a 3-2, go back, ask in regards to the increase and what would it mean if it's delay. In the staff report, there's some information, but I think that Marty would like to have staff just articulate that so those viewing and can kind of circle back around to our last meeting.
Sure. Javon Grogan, city manager. Let me answer this really quick. I think there are some mechanics of a 218 process that we would need to undertake if we were going to change the rate. But that aside, I think there's some financial mechanics that are covered in the staff report. And so at our last council meeting, the question was, can staff go back and talk to Recology about potentially having the rate increase occur only in the latter 6 months of the fiscal year? And so we had those conversations, and the answer was Recology did not agree to forego the rate increase, which meant that if the rate increase did not take effect on July 1, it would need to be, that amount would need to be recouped over a shorter horizon. Let's say that horizon is 6 months. And so the rate increase that is before the city council per the contract and the CPI is a 1.62%. If that was raised not over 12 months, but over 6 months, essentially the increase for those 6 months would be a 3.24% increase for the 6 month period. And so to the public, it would potentially appear to be a doubling of the rate increase, even though that amount is spread out over, it's the same amount being raised that would be raised over the course of the year, just in 6 months. To break that down into dollars, council and the community may remember, for the 32-gallon residential toter trash can, the increase, the monthly increase for the 1.62% is 51 cents per month. If that is raised over just a 6-month horizon, it's a 3.24% increase, and that doubles it to $1.02. And so the financial magnitude is under $1 or just over $1. The other sort of mechanics of delaying the increase is that the contract also provides for a CPI increase in next fiscal year, the 21-22 fiscal year. And so, for example, if this rate increase is delayed 6 months, and so there's a 3.2% increase from January through June 2021, and let's say there's another CPI increase next year of 2%, what a resident may feel or think that they're being charged is a 3.2% rate increase in January, and then if CPI is 2%, another 2% in July. Thus, I just received a 5.24% increase, for example, right? That's different than having a 1.62% increase for all of 2021, and then a 2% increase for 21-22. I know that that's a lot of numbers without charts and graphs, but it sort of boils down to the delaying the rate increase without a foregoing of that revenue means that that rate increase would be doubled in the latter 6 months. And there may be an appearance of compounding for the CPI increase in 2021.
Marty, please.
Yes, city manager, correct. And then there's the complication of having to go through the notice again. So this is a lot of work for a little amount of money. And we asked Recology to delay it, and now we're ready to take action on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. Through city staff, I reached out to another garbage company and who serves a few communities in the peninsula, and is it not commonplace that the contracts that exist in the other jurisdictions also review, whether it's detailed year like we do every 3 years, but there's an annual review and or potential within their contract?
That is my experience.
I mean, there's only a handful for the county of San Mateo, honestly. But I had heard that too. I just wanted to do a trust but verify that exists in other agencies as well. Any comments from Michael or Laura?
Yeah, through the chair.
Laura.
So, I just wanted to say too that, you can go through a contract and look at what Recology is required to do, but they do way above and beyond that. I've never been with an organization or a group or a fundraising group and you reach out to Recology and they are always willing to support those groups. Whether it was Relay for Life for many years, whether it was the festivals, whether it was a high school fundraiser or a John Muir, they have always been very supportive to our community. And I want to thank them for that. And I think that a lot of what they do goes very much unnoticed. So I think that that's important that, we all get good service. You can call them up. Hey, I didn't get my garbage out on time. I missed it. There's all sorts of things that they do and will help out. And the communication has been excellent. And I know there have been trying times, and I know things have changed with recycling and, and they did a great job in really communicating the need to gotta have clean recycling. And here's a program we're going to put into place. And we saw the community turn around and make those improvements. So, kudos to Recology and for the work that they continue to do in San Bruno.
Michael said he was good. Anything else, Linda?
I just wanted to ask, I don't think I ever got a clear answer on the 16-gallon.
No, so in going back to look at the numbers, Linda, what I've been told without in order for us to come up with a precise number for you, we would have to know exactly, have to approximate how many people would participate. But the answer that I was given was it may actually look to be a rate increase in order to be able to offer that 16 gallon. And the reason being is that, remember that the garbage man is going to show up at each of the houses anyway. So what you're going to have a delivery cost. First, you're going to have the capital cost of the new 16 gallon carts. You're going to have the delivery cost that would be associated with it. And then you also have to, in order for them to qualify and be able to use the 16 gallon, they'd have to take material from the garbage can, which unfortunately nowadays it's the cheapest thing to do is to bury garbage, is you'd have to take material from the garbage can and either put it in the recycling cart or put it in the compost cart. And it's very costly to actually, to process organics. And again, there is no value anymore in recycling. There's actually a cost to process that as well. So adding all those things up, it would not be beneficial, in our opinion, for the city of San Bruno to implement a 16 gallon, because it could actually end up costing the ratepayers more in order to implement that can. I hope that was helpful.
That was. And then in regards to Recology and COVID-19, I know someone who was recently let go from Recology, and I'd like to know how COVID has impacted Recology and whether this rate increase will have an effect one way or the other on any of the employees that are here in San Bruno.
COVID-19, what I can tell you is that the way how it's affecting Recology at this moment is the reduction in commercial businesses. So we're seeing commercial businesses closed. The shops at Tanforan has closed. So we are not servicing those facilities at the moment. Recology has not let go of any of its employees. We have kind of revamped them and have them doing other things at this time in order to try and keep all of their jobs. How it's going to affect residents, we hope it doesn't affect the residents in the long term. We're trying to cut costs, reduce overtime, and do everything in our power to keep costs at a minimum so that it doesn't affect our ratepayers in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Marty, I saw your hand up, but was that from before? You're good?
That was from, yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and then just finally, and I believe also, and thank you for following up on the 16, Linda, because you did ask that before. My understanding, and correct me, but those that participate in our city in the 20 gallon is about at 9 or 10%, I believe. So out of that, what will we get to go to 16? And then I think it's that capital of whether that's worth it. But General Manager can correct me if I'm wrong on my stats.
No, you're correct. About 10% of our residential population subscribes to the 20 gallon.
Okay, thank you. And then I also wanted just to remind again that there is a 25% discount for cable TV for garbage if you are having the 32 gallon toter, and also, for water and sewer. So that is available through the city, has been and is. And again, if you do go down to the 20, my understanding, it's about $7.10 between the 32 and the 20. So those are some other elements I wanted to bring up. Okay, so we're back on to item D as far as any action from council.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve item D. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all.
To the chair, can I just ask
Yes. I'm sorry.
I just want to say that for when this comes back to us, since we are being told this will come back, I would like to see where we are with 5.9 and 5.9.3. If those are the sections in the contract that it appears are not being adhered to at this time, so that we can look into whether we are getting whether Recology is adhering to their part of the agreement as well. So I'd like a full report on that when that comes back to us. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move off consent, go on to conduct of business. City Clerk.
Item 6A, adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the agreement with MIG Inc. to finalize construction documents and provide bid and construction support services for the Florida Avenue Park project in an amount not to exceed $45,205.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I was just going to participation. Marty.
I will need to recuse myself. I live within 1,000 feet of the park, according to our city attorney. So with his recommendation, I am recused.
Thank you for acknowledging. And city clerk, if you'll remove.
Yes, one moment. I'm trying to locate him since the screen was shared. Just one moment.
No problem.
He is removed.
Thank you. And just for the audience, this is what was done for me on the Bay Hill specific plan, and that is that it's not just enough to mute us, apparently, just for being safe than sorry, we are taken out. So we are not within the context of the regular participants. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and turn it back over to staff.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Joanne McGreeny, and I am the Community Services Director. Tonight's presentation is in regard to the restart of the Florida Avenue Park project. Tonight's agenda consists of the following items: an update on the most recent activities since our last presentation to the City Council on the project, including a photo of the site with the pine tree removed and an illustration of the new location for the specimen tree replacing it. I will give an overview of the proposed project restart plan and review the budget to date for the park. We will conclude with the request for council action on this item. Last September, the City Council approved a revised conceptual plan for the Florida Avenue Park. The new plan retains the cedar tree, removes the pine tree, and replaces it with a coast live oak. On November 13th, 2019, the pine tree was removed from the site. The proposed location for the oak tree is near the park entrance. In accordance with the settlement agreement with the Friends of Florida Park, they were informed of the new location and did not provide any feedback. This slide depicts the site in its current state with the pine tree removed. This illustration depicts the new proposed location of the coast live oak tree. As you can see, the tree is near the entrance to the park. The proposed restart plan for the project has two phases. Phase 1 really addresses finalizing construction documents for the park. MIG, the landscape architects for this project, would complete the tasks listed here, most notable completion of the construction documents and revisions to the final bid set. Costs associated with Phase 1 are $25,970. The estimated time frame associated to these tasks is approximately 3 months, with completion estimated in August of 2020. Phase 2 of the project restart addresses bid and construction support services. The most notable tasks for MIG in this phase would include bid support, final inspection, and project record drawings of the park. Including Phase 2 in this project restart plan allows the city to support a shovel-ready project should funding be identified through a grant or some other source to proceed with construction of the park. Costs associated with Phase 2 are $19,235, which reflects the current rate. In the interim, while pursuing funding opportunities, the city intends to provide open space to the neighborhood by installing irrigation and applying grass seed to create a turfed area. The grass will likely take a few weeks to a month to grow in. Once the lawn is established, the temporary fence will be removed and the community will have a new space to enjoy. Listed here is a quick rundown of the costs to date and additional fees for this project. We note here property acquisition, demolition and cleanup of the property, the MIG consultant services to date, fees associated with potential litigation for a total of $1,100,324. The additional fees for restarting the project with MIG total $45,205. So tonight, we are asking that you adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the agreement with MIG Incorporated to finalize construction documents and provide bid and construction support services for Florida Avenue Park project in an amount not to exceed $45,205. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from colleagues? Laura?
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, I agree with that. I like the direction we're going, so I appreciate that report.
Linda?
Yeah, thank you. Very excited. I guess just how quickly can we get this moving? Thank you.
Michael?
So my question, so I agree we should definitely move forward and get this shovel ready, but a concern I have is that this would definitely be dependent now on identifying some sort of a grant that would help us fund the construction portion of it. And with the massive amount of debt that the federal government has taken on due to COVID-19, I'm wondering, is that going to impact our ability to find grants? Are those grants going to be available? And if they are going to be impacted and harder to find, how long can this design sit on a shelf without being, I don't know, having to be redone? I mean, is this something that, that could sit there for a year and we just, dust it off a year from now when money materializes?
Sure. Councilmember Salazar, Javon Grogan, why don't I take that? So good question. If it sits on the shelf a year, 2, 3 years, that's fine. Codes may change if it sits on the shelf and we're unable to find funding. It is typically a fraction of the cost to go up and update the plans. What we really want and what we're proposing here is to spend the $44,000 to really have a shovel-ready project so we can go out and seek those grant funds. And you're absolutely right, granting opportunities may be reduced now due to COVID-19, but we're really gonna go out on an all-out effort and not just pursue governmental entities, but also nonprofits and groups that give specifically to parks in neighborhoods that do not have parks. I think we also will be talking to the city council about Measure K and making a specific ask of the county for Measure K funds. Maybe this is something and a project that will be shovel ready that we can ask for funding for. But absolutely, and I was raising my hand earlier because I really just wanted to point out that in the proposed budget, we are recommending that we unfortunately defund $900,000 from this park. And I'm pausing because that is not something that we recommend it lightly, but our fiscal challenges are very significant, and we'll talk about that a little later tonight. But I do think it's important for the community to know that are watching this item that there is within the proposed budget removing $900,000 from the park budget to help cover gaps in our operating budget this year.
Okay, right, thank you for that. And I think that the timing thing was a concern because if it was something that didn't really have a good chance of being funded, then I would have thought that maybe this money could have gone toward doing an interim, upgrade of the lot. But if there is some opportunity, whether it be from governmental or private funding, then I definitely think this is a good idea to complete the design. So thank you.
Right.
Let me get clarification on that. So what I was hearing was having it reseeded. Obviously, that takes a little bit of time, I understand. So correct me, and maybe I didn't hear it correctly. Was it not to, with it being defunded potentially, to have it an open lot so that people can utilize it?
Right. So in the budget presentation, one of the things that we talk about is that we still intend to leave funding in the project, approximately $94,000, to cover both this cost and the cost of the $45,000, and the cost of seeding and installing irrigation, so we can take down the fence and have a open grass area until such time as we can find funding to develop the park.
Right, so that therefore at least it could be utilized by the neighborhood. You don't have the visual of a linked fence, and after the seed and the irrigation is done. Is there any guesstimate on what timeline that would take to have those things accomplished?
There's currently a sewer and water project out there right now where they're installing a water meter, and we have had our staff investigate the possibility of installing the irrigation with city staff and seeding the grass. And so we think that that is something that can be accomplished within existing resources, but likely not opening and taking down the fence, letting the grass germinate.
Well, after that is what I'm asking. So do we have a timeline, but that's the expectation? Am I hearing that?
That is the expectation. Do not have a time on that, but we're hoping for this summer.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Laura?
Yeah, so that's, I think putting that pressure on staff with the limited resources we have, and I think I appreciate that staff's going to try to do that to save us a lot of money to do that project in-house. And I think we have to set the example of having a property not getting developed and that we're going to take care of it and take the eyesore off the street. So I want to really appreciate that.
Okay. Anything else, Joanne or City Manager? City Manager, Joanne, is there anything else? I'll take that as a no. Okay, this is a resolution. Is there any, if you take the presentation down, please? And if I'll bring it back to council, and is there any action?
Mayor, we do have members of the public who would like to comment.
I apologize. Thank you, Melissa, because I had gone in there and I didn't see anybody last time I checked. And please.
Okay, the first is Stephen Seymour. Just one moment. Stephen, I'm bringing you in.
Hi, it's Sandra Perez.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Sandra. I forgot.
All right, no worries. Looking at the plan, it's kind of hard to tell the type of vegetation that's going in there. So I know a lot of us, Jeffrey Todd, Colinas Costeras, are really concerned about moving forward with native plants and putting behind us all the water thirsty lawns or other type of vegetation. We don't know what the future holds, what our water system's going to look like. So that's a discussion that was had before. So that's a big concern. And just cleaning it up in the meantime, it's going to be 2-3 years. Yeah, clean it up, let the neighbors use it. And it's just really unfortunate, I have to say, they would let us down this track, having a healthy heritage tree removed just to be replaced by another tree. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of dollars the city spent to cut down one tree. Had most of this council, when they voted, both trees will be gone. So I'm happy residents stood up. At least one tree was saved. And I just hopefully in the future we can look more holistically to taking care of trees and nature in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, City Clerk?
No, I do not see any other hands raised.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to council for any action. Again, it's a resolution.
Motion to approve the resolution for the Florida Park.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Recused.
Oh, I'm sorry, recused. Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1 with Councilmember Medina recused.
Okay, thank you. And if you could bring Marty back in.
Yes, just one moment. One moment, I'm working on getting him back in the room.
Okay.
He is rejoining the meeting, so it might take just a moment.
All right.
Okay, he is coming into the room now. He should be. Sorry, 1 second. I don't know if he says he's having trouble reconnecting.
While we're waiting, can I ask a question?
On which item?
Just a general question.
Okay, sure. Do you want a break?
No, I mean, I think I just the Florida Park item had the information about the potential lawsuit and the cost, and I was wondering if we're going to have that same information in the future for items as they come to us.
Okay, that's off topic from the Florida Park. So, and we're having Marty come back. So
yes, he's in the room. I'm bringing him in as a panelist. Let's see if this one works.
I say that it has. It's not even on the agenda. So for us to have a discussion on that.
It's just it's not a discussion, it's just a question, but I'll ask during comment so that I can get a report back at the next meeting, I guess. But
that would be more appropriate. Thank you.
I'm going to mute myself so I can call Councilmember Medina. Just 1 moment.
Okay.
Mayor Medina, can I request a recess? Councilmember Medina is having trouble accessing the meeting.
A good call. We'll go ahead and have a 5-minute recess and reconvene, and then we'll all be back together.
I had it. That was my fault.
had a grant for cities that have that they service.
Uh-huh.
and Figure,
Yeah, yeah, for the city, yeah. Oh, wow. Awesome.
And I thought I read this maybe 2 years ago now after COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
But, the airlines are struggling.
Yeah.
But it's
Worth a try. Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
All right. Cheers.
You good, Marty? You're on mute.
1 second, we're unmuting you. Can you hear us?
All right. I
You
can hear
good?
you guys. Yes.
All right. We can see you.
What a weird experience.
I mean, when they took you out of the meeting, they really took you out of the meeting.
I was like, why did you kick me out of the meeting for? I could listen. It's all good though. You learned something new.
Okay. Do we have our colleagues back?
I'm here.
Thank you, Linda.
We're
And
back on cable.
And we're good. We're live.
Yep.
Okay. We're reconvening back on conduct of business. We're going to move on to item B.
Item 6B, waive first reading and introduce amendments to San Bruno Municipal Code Title 5 nuisances as part of a comprehensive municipal code update.
Okay, City Attorney, comes back to us from last time when you were asking us for our input and direction, and now you brought back some of that all packaged up. So, City Attorney.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. I know we have another item on the agenda, and I'll try to move through the presentation just as quickly as possible and highlight a couple of points of direction that we took from the City Council at the last meeting and incorporated them into the ordinance that you have before you for considering introduction tonight. So our agenda tonight is just a bit of background. We're going to discuss a couple of policy issues that came up last time, and then briefly talk about next steps. So you'll remember this background. You've seen it on a number of slides when we've brought back ordinance amendments to the various titles. We're on Title 5, but the primary focus of our review of the entire municipal code is updating for internal consistency and current law. And of course, an opportunity for any policy discussions that the City Council wishes to have. And we have had those policy discussions actually about each of the titles that we brought to the City Council. So that's a great opportunity for the Council to weigh in as we go through the process. So we've had a process that's lasted just a little over a year, starting last October of 2018. And we brought it forward with Titles 1 and 2 that were adopted and then Title 3 in 2019 in July, and then Title 4 in March of this year. And then on the 28th of April, just about a month ago, you provided some policy direction regarding Title 5, which is what we're on tonight. So you'll remember that Title 5 has 8 chapters, and I'm going to just display them up on the screen here for you so you have them in mind. And so we're proposing amendments to 4 of those chapters. And unfortunately, my screen just changed and the PowerPoint is no longer displayed. Oh, there it goes again. All right, I think we're all set. So we have some proposed amendments to the 4 chapters, and I see that my clicker is now no longer working. So I can't scroll through the slides. So I'm sorry about that. We're going to take just a moment to see if we can wait for just a minute to get that technical difficulty fixed. And we apologize for the delay. Oh, sorry, folks, the clicker is not working.
I can go ahead and share, Mark. I'll stop your share and I'll start sharing. If you could close out of here.
Okay, well, okay, well, we seem to have it back up again. And Melissa, I'm not sure what you can do or which slide you can go to. Each of the items is separately displayed, but if you just scroll through slide number 7, that's the one that we're currently on right now. Or excuse me, slide number 6, I apologize.
Okay, 1 second. Slide number 6, okay.
That's correct.
I'm getting there. There's a lot of graphics.
That's all right. And since we set it up so that I could control it and display each of the sections on my click, maybe when the slide comes up, I'll just tell you to change the slide and you could just display the entire slide at once. Is that okay?
Okay.
All
Would
right,
you like me
sounds
to
good.
just display all these graphics now or just
Yeah,
one at a
you
time?
put them all up there, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, so we are proposing amendments tonight to 4 chapters. And there's section 5.04.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Oh no.
5.04.
There we go.
Great. 5.04, which is nuisances. And the main thing that we're doing tonight, based on the City Council's direction, is to propose a couple of wording changes so that it's consistent with Chapter 7.36. And 7.36 is something that we saw after the last meeting, or realized was there after the last meeting, dealing with abandoned and inoperable vehicles. And that was a topic of conversation at the last meeting. And it was one of the main interests of the City Council to address. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. There's a few other wording changes for internal consistency. And then finally, we've adopted the staff and City Council suggestion to prohibit the feeding of wild animals if doing so is causing a public nuisance. And if you could go to slide number 7, that would be great. Thank you.
Do you know how many graphics are on here?
Yes,
I
there
don't
are
wanna-
3.
Okay,
below that.
thank you.
You bet. So we have some proposed minor amendments to 3 of the sections that are displayed on the screen, 5.08, 5.16, and 5.22, which is the next one after 5.16. There you go. And there were no comments, I don't believe, about those at the last meeting. All right, if you could go to slide 8, that would be great. And there are 3 main bullet points here that basically Title V has proven to be comprehensive and sufficient. And what we went over last time was the difficult code enforcement cases are usually not caused by inadequate ordinances. There's a few common issues underlying code enforcement, and there's 4 sub-bullets under that, Melissa, along with 4 sub-bullets under the last bullet. So if you could just click that clicker 8 times, I think you'll be right there. So we talked about this last time. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's the question of whether there's a public versus a private nuisance, whether the violations are transitory or difficult to confirm. And oftentimes residents who have been engaging in whatever the behavior is that violates the code don't want to change. And often that's the case regardless of whether there's a fine or a sanction imposed. They'll just ignore it, they won't pay it, they'll appeal it, they'll drag it out. And this has been the city's experience in some of the more difficult code enforcement cases. Sometimes they're neighbor disputes, sometimes circumstances outside of their control. Sometimes there's a good reason in their mind why they would like to keep the nuisance condition on their property. So Melissa, if you could go to slide number 9, that would be great. There's 2 main bullet points, and there's 2 under the second point. So the last time we requested staff input regarding any unaddressed public nuisance. And one of the things that came up was parking of inoperable vehicles on private property. So as you know, the challenge with this, as we've talked about at many meetings, both having to do with public and private property, is that the built environment really isn't adequate to accommodate the number and types of vehicles, whether they operate or not, that are owned and operated by residents. And this sort of problem really satisfies all of the criteria that you saw on your prior slide for a difficult code enforcement matter. And so that's why they're so intractable. So if you could go to the next slide, Melissa, that would be great. And there's 1 main bullet with 3 sub-bullets and a couple of those under the last one. So briefly, we talked about this earlier in the meeting. I think the city manager brought it up, as did the police chief. And 1 more bullet after the purpose. Thank you. The city has, in fact, the city council adopted a number of strategies to limit overcrowding both on the street and on private property. So we've had the residential permit parking program implemented after quite a number of months, if not years of study. We've had a periodic enforcement for violations, and you've heard the police chief mention those this evening. We've had adopted new zoning regulations to allow additional off-street parking, which is what the city manager alluded to in one of his earlier presentations. And the whole point of all of these coordinated strategies is to increase the amount of parking availability, both on public property and on private property. Nevertheless, parking of inoperable vehicles can still be an issue. And so if you could go to slide 11, there's 2 main bullet points here. And if you click 1 more time and then another 4 times, you'll be all done with this one. So the city council's direction at the last meeting was to focus on inoperable vehicles. And what your existing code in Chapter 7 says, that inoperable vehicles may only be parked in an enclosed building that's not visible from public or private property. Well, if you pause for a minute, you'll realize sort of how broad and all-encompassing that is. So what that essentially means is that if you have an inoperable vehicle, it has to be parked in a garage, in essence, or some enclosed building that isn't, so that the vehicle itself isn't visible from either public property or from private property. So given the city council's direction at the last meeting, what we did is went through Title V and made a couple of amendments so that Title V is now consistent with Chapter 7.36. Well, what did we do? In a couple of places, we incorporated references to 7.36 at the suggestion of, I think it was Councilmember Medina, but I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, I can't recall, that we've clarified that a DMV certificate of non-operation is not sufficient for parking an inoperable vehicle if it's visible, and we'll amend 7.36 at a later date. So what this basically means is that just because you go to the DMV and get something that says my car is non-operational, that doesn't mean it's an operational vehicle under city codes. It's still an inoperable vehicle and you still can't park it except in an enclosed building. We made some minor changes to conform in a couple of sections so that all the vehicle types are matched up. And then finally, one of the suggestions was it was sort of unclear how long camper shells could be on property. And it currently says reasonable time, and I agree that was unclear. So we've changed that to 72 hours to be consistent with the normal 72-hour rule of parking on public property. So those are in essence the changes that we proposed to address the city council's direction and for consistency to Chapter 7.36. So if you could go to slide number 12. And we have two main bullet points here with two sub-bullets under the second one. So these amendments, we think, do make it consistent with 7.36. But just because you amend the code and make it consistent doesn't mean it's going to solve the problem. And so there will be additional discussion with the city council at a number of future meetings having to do with future efficiencies proposed for implementation of an inoperable vehicle abatement program. And just to let everybody know, in case it wasn't clear to begin with, this is a difficult, intractable problem and often requires a substantial amount of effort and resources by cities up and down the peninsula and frankly all over the state to abate non-operable vehicles. And that is especially the case when they're being abated from private property where their due process rights are more robust than they are with respect to removal on public property. If you could go to slide 13, that would be fantastic. And we have one main bullet point for parking with just two sub-bullets. So we are not changing, and there's just three under tarps. We'll get to that in a minute. At the city council's direction, we are not changing the number of allowed operable parked boats, trailers, campers, or RV. Our code says 1, and the consensus, I think, was to leave it at 1. So if they're operable, you can park one of those on the property. And then finally, relating to parking, there was a discussion about tarps, and I confess that I didn't get a clear direction, I don't think, from really even a majority of the city council to cover or not to cover. And I think there's probably differing views on what's less attractive, the tarp or what's under them. And so there's no amendments proposed at this time. If the city council decides this is a problem we need to address, we can certainly do so in connection with an implementation program coming down the road to abate inoperable vehicles on private property. So we don't have any suggestions about tarps at this time. I think the dealing with the inoperable vehicles is going to be plenty for staff to deal with. You could flip quickly to slide 14 and we're almost done. The other unaddressed public nuisance conditions, there's one more after this, would be to prohibit feeding wild animals if causing a public nuisance. The reason why we worded it this way is to avoid the problem of which animals or some animals and not other animals or other sorts of complexities that actually would make it difficult to enforce. If there's a public nuisance, we know what that's defined as, then there's a complaint staff can enforce. And then there's minor wording amendments throughout the code. So the final slide is number 15 with just 4 bullets. And that is to introduce the ordinance tonight. After you've reviewed the amendments, we can schedule adoption for the very next meeting. And we still remain on track, hopefully to complete all of the chapters hopefully by the end of next year, if not sooner. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, City Attorney. Questions from colleagues? Laura.
Trying to raise my hand. So Mark, you're correct. I don't think we were really clear on tarps or no tarps. So I think there is really no right answer. I will say that, I think your words are excellent in that it's not the code enforcement. It's not the wording that we need to change. That there really is good. It really is a good ordinance. It's really trying to enforce this. I found it to be very interesting how many vehicles are not currently registered. And some go back to 2012, 2009 that are parked on driveways. And, when you start doing a lot of walking, in a very short amount of time, you get into double digits. And I think that a lot of those vehicles are parked on driveways. And I think that those driveways take up parking that a vehicle that's on the street can be parked in. So I like the changes that you're requesting, and I think you did a great job capturing our comments. And I just think we just need to try to enforce them.
Linda.
Yeah, I just want to refer to, it's page 142 to 143, and this is, it's issuance of administrative citations. So I spoke with Mark earlier about this. I just want to make sure we mention it, that it's right now it states when all the following are true. It actually requires the city to truly be the enforcement officer between a landlord and a tenant, because it requires that the tenant has to be in possession of the property, that there be a rental agreement that provides evidence that the rental or lease agreement prohibits the cultivation of the cannabis, and then that the rental property owner or agent did not know the tenant was illegally cultivating cannabis and no complaint, et cetera, or information caused the rental property owner or agent to have actual notice of the illegal cannabis cultivation. So for anybody who's watching this recording, it's on page 142 to 143 of the packet. The issue here that I wanted to just raise is that it really places the city in an awkward position, because the state law does allow, I believe it's 6 cannabis plants. And the city then is to kind of step in and enforce a contract between the landlord and the tenant. So my recommendation or my suggestion would be to add somewhere in here some language that says, that does not adhere to the state law, because otherwise the city's going to have to use its own resources, and we're already at capacity to try to really enforce a lease that's between a landlord and a tenant, and maybe adhering to the state laws. So I don't know. I know Mark and I spoke about this earlier, and Mark, I don't know if you have any comments on that, but that would be my suggestion and recommendation to make it really easier on you in the long run.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please, City Attorney.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Mason. I thank you for noting that and noting it in the version of the ordinance. And I do think it's a good suggestion. We can easily insert something here that says, in violation of state law, whatever it may be. That's not what it'll say, but we'll add some words in there that make it clear that the staff is not to be enforcing when the tenant is cultivating in a way that is consistent with state law.
Right, and also that's yes, and also that we're not going to get between if there's a violation of the lease, there are eviction proceedings for that, right? Or that's a landlord issue.
That's right, and normally the code enforcement would not get involved in those matters. So you're right.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Marty.
Just a second. Okay. So my question is about the in-ops and tarps, right? So let's say you have an in-op on a property, it gets reported, the property owner throws a tarp on top of it, and then what happens? Let's say that tarp is on that car for a long time, and with the sun, it starts getting tattered and it's blowing around like something out of The Walking Dead, and it's just really unsightly. So I think if we're going to go ahead and do this one time, I think we should tighten that up a little bit. And I'm interested in hearing how it would be enforced if somebody just threw a tarp on an in-op.
So Councilmember Medina, if I may, through the chair,
Yeah.
are you asking how is it enforced now, or how could it be enforced if we changed or amended the ordinance in some way?
Right. So now if it's an in-op, you can see the registration as long as you're on the path of getting to the home, like a postal carrier. You could look at and see that it's not registered, right? So what would stop somebody from throwing a tarp on that vehicle and then say, leave me alone, it's tarped, I don't want you to bother me, I have a right to my privacy?
So I think that probably the best way for me to answer that question, Councilmember Medina, is twofold. First of all, to indicate that that's a detail that I think we will need to work out if and when an inoperable vehicle abatement program comes to the city council. And I think the city manager has previously alluded to the fact that there may be other code amendments that might be required once the city council authorizes that program. I think right now we probably don't know enough about that issue to determine exactly what to do about it. The other problem with that is, or the other issue that I think comes up with that, is to determine what is the problem that we're trying to solve. And I think the best way to put that is we're trying to eliminate what appear to be nuisance conditions on private property, dilapidated materials, structures, junk, those sorts of things that make the property appear dilapidated. So that goal is not accomplished necessarily by having an ordinance saying there's no tarps on vehicles, because you could put a nice tarp on a vehicle and a nice car cover and it looks good. It may look good for a long time. So then what do? You say, well, you can have a tarp or a cover, but only when it's not dilapidated. So, and that word dilapidated is used in the nuisance ordinance. So there is some precedent for that. But it's much more difficult to enforce and to determine what exactly that means. A good example of that actually that came up in a property situation was an awning that was present in what staff believed was a dilapidated condition in a visible location on El Camino Real. So it wasn't a car, but it was an awning. And it took months, if not a year, along with conversations with the property owner's attorney, to have them make that awning not look dilapidated anymore. So just on one property, it was very, very difficult to enforce that. So I think that's something that we can look at when we look at enforcement of inoperable vehicles in general.
No, and that is fine. Thank you for that explanation. I just recall that some of the tricks of when I worked here as a code enforcement officer that people could use to circumvent the intent. So I look forward to that in-op, the future program to deal with it, because the more in-ops that are out of driveways, the more parking spaces that are available to that property owner and to the community from having those vehicles removed. So thank you.
If I may, through the chair.
Yes, city manager.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there are no current plans to generate an inoperable vehicle enforcement campaign. What the city attorney was referring to is within the proposed budget, we do have code enforcement moving to the police department, and I have tasked the police department with doing a thorough look with the tools that are available to enhance our enforcement. and that may require subsequent changes to Title V or Title VII. But specific to a campaign for inoperable vehicles or abandoned vehicles, that is not currently on staff's work plan, but in a general direction to increase the effectiveness of our code enforcement is. Thank you.
Thank you, Javon, for that clarification. And I apologize if anything I said suggested that you would immediately be seeing a program to remove inoperable vehicles from private property. That was not my intention.
Michael?
Thank you. And so I just wanted to say that a lot of what we're discussing really starts getting dangerously close to just being an infringement on people's right to do, basically to do what they want to do with their property. And you can start with tarps and saying, your tarp is too ugly, and then all of a sudden we're saying, I don't like the color of your house, and the flag that you're flying in front of your house is too tattered, it's too faded, I don't like it, so you have to change it. So I mean, I don't know where it stops from there. And really, like the city attorney said, it comes back to what problem are we trying to solve? And if getting rid of tarps we think is going to create more parking spots, I would debate that and say I don't see that happening. I think you can even force people to get things out of their driveway and they're still going to park in front of their house because they like having the parking spot in front of their house reserved for them. And I just don't see that this is really the solution to the problem that we're trying to solve. But with that, I do agree that we do need to give our staff the tools that they need to do their jobs, and some of the revamping of this does allow them at least to have that something to fall back on and to help the community where there are complaints. I know a lot of this is still going to be complaint driven. And so hopefully we do focus on areas that are indeed a blight. So we're not talking about the one abandoned car or the one inoperable car, but hopefully places where we've seen 2, 3, up to 10 cars on a lot abandoned and dilapidated, and those are the areas that we do want to clean up. And so this is a step in the right direction. The one area that kind of jumped out at me that I think I would like modified was in regards to it's 5.04.030 public nuisance conditions. And I noticed that in section F or part F of that, motorcycles were added to items that would, you could only have one of, even in a garage or in a driveway, you can only have one motorcycle. And I just don't think that motorcycles should be lumped in with boats and trailers and campers. They're small items. They're generally used for personal transportation. And so I don't think that they should be thrown into that category.
If I may, Mr. Mayor?
City Attorney.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Salazar, for that suggestion. So I picked that up in my review because motorcycles is listed in another section, and we thought, okay, well, they should all be consistent. I think the intent of this is to say that if you're right, you can have one boat, one trailer, camper, whatever, RV or motorcycle. And certainly you could take motorcycles out of this and not affect the rest of the code. I only added it in for consistency, but it's up to the city council if they'd like to remove it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that would be my request. I mean, I'm okay with everything else, but I think that is, I mean, I know a lot of people here in town that have 2 motorcycles, and basically this says you can no longer have 2 motorcycles. I have 2 motorcycles.
I didn't know you had 2. Okay. Let's see if I'm not seeing any persons from the audience, the public, with their hands up. So with that said, we'll go back. Is there any, Marty, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
I agree with Councilman Salazar. I think motorcycles are absolutely fine. To limit it to 1 would be unreasonable. If I could have 2 motorcycles, I would. So I think we should keep that out of there. Thank you.
I would concur on the motorcycle as well. Well, out of this thus far, we've had in regards to motorcycle, and then also adding or inserting language of not enforcing between landlord and tenant on the campus that Linda had discussed. So that's what's before us. This is item B, which is there is a, and city attorney, correct me, but we need to waive the first reading.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and then as far as making any of those changes, whether motorcycles and or cannabis, would that be in the introduction of the amendments is where you'd like that placed?
That's correct. So once you waive the first reading, then when you make the motion to introduce, just indicate that both of those amendments will be included and brought back for adoption.
Understood. All right, let's go. Is there any action regarding waiving the first reading? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we waive the first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second to waive the first reading. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And now there's action for introducing the amendments, and if somebody wants to, chooses to include one or both of the other items. Don't all speak at once.
Okay, I move that we bring forward the amendments to the ordinance with the changes to the motorcycle piece and the cannabis piece that was raised by Council Member Mason.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Marty. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 7, which is our study session.
Item 7A, conduct a study session to review the city manager's proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 operating and capital improvement CIP budget.
The city manager, and then of course, I bet you we're going to see the finance director after.
Got it. Let us work out our technical kinks.
He said that this next presentation is only about 10 slides.
This presentation is 74 slides. We will go as expeditiously as possible, recognizing that it's 9:30, but we do want to do the appropriate articulation for council and the public. As we get that up, the full budget slide deck is, I don't know, it's 297 now, and you can thank your lovely finance department for that. So we're ready. So Javon Grogan, city manager, and Keith DeMartini, our finance director, will take the podium shortly. So I want to first off begin by thanking all of the staff that had a lot of work in putting together this proposed budget. It was truly a team effort with rounds and rounds of revisions, and unfortunately, given our fiscal context, further reductions being proposed. And so while it is called the city manager's proposed budget, we do nothing alone, and it's truly a team effort. So thank you, team. Okay, so tonight's agenda, we will review at a very, very high level the process to develop the budget. We'll talk about the fiscal context that we find ourselves in. We will then go through the proposed general fund budget and deficit reduction strategies for the general fund. We will then have a high-level fiscal condition summary and general fund detail by our finance director. We will then go through general fund financial summary, general fund revenues, and then revenue enhancement strategies, and then that will close out tonight. You do not see a detailed presentation on expenditures there because that is for our all-day budget retreat with the City Council tomorrow. Our objectives tonight, we have three. I'm going to start from the bottom, and it's ask questions. Yes, this is a presentation, but City Council, this is your budget deliberations, and the budget is the key to the city. And we want to make sure that we provide you as many answers that we can tonight and throughout the rest of our budget process. So we do have staff that are paying attention to the questions being asked, and we will answer those that we can. We really want to discuss the proposed strategies, give a high level tonight and further detail later when we have our department presentations. We will discuss the pressures facing the general fund, and we will sort of give a summary of both operating and capital. So budget development process, why don't we begin there? So our mission as an organization, the City of San Bruno exists to provide exemplary services for the community that will enhance the quality of life. Our vision for our future is to be the peninsula city of choice in order to live, in which to live, learn, work, shop, and play. Our values are listed there, but integrity is number one, teamwork, exemplary service to the community, friendliness, and commitment. City Council priority focus areas, they're there. They are not listed in priority area. The City Council has had a number of meetings this year to talk about priority focus areas and strategic initiatives. We have another one coming up on June 4th. But the current City Council priority focus areas, and at your last meeting, you did confirm that these would be your priority focus areas for 2021 fiscal year, but that will be finalized again on June 4th. But it's implement the vision for the transit corridor and revitalize downtown and our commercial corridor, assure rehabilitation and replacement of critical community facilities and infrastructure, grow our revenues, continue to strengthen community connections, protect and improve the aesthetics and safety of the community, proactively plan for our future, and last but not least, organizational health and employee success. Just a quick highlight, each year the city manager delivers a proposed budget to the City Council. There's a robust set of meetings. The City Council does have to adopt a balanced budget, and even though we have a deficit this year, there are a number of budget balancing strategies that are proposed before you. As you know, you receive quarterly and mid-year updates, and we had a number of those. We had all of those this year with a number of challenges before us. So initial instructions that I provided to our staff pre-COVID-19, but this would not be an enhancement budget. And any, frankly, enhancements really needed to align to a City Council priority focused area. Zero base for contractual services, tools, equipment, dues. Frankly, anything that we could keep or zero at a zero increase, we strove to, knowing that there are some contracts and increases that are outside of our immediate control. And we strived to maintain general fund reserves at the policy limit, albeit knowing that the reality of our financial context is that we have reduced available cash in our general fund reserve due to the loan to the City Net Department. This is a quick recap on very high level of the budget process that we've undertaken. January 21st is when those instructions were provided to department that really set out the initial population of the budget, and then went through a series of reviews and internal meetings. And again, once we put the budget together, there was need for further reductions, COVID-19 and otherwise. And so those are reflected in what is before you today. The City Council will remember you had your annual retreat on February 22nd, where you really had an in-depth presentation from the departments and everything that they were working on, and got sort of a underneath the hood view of the departments. And so that will happen again tomorrow when we have all the departments present for a presentation. April 21st, we had a study session on strategic initiatives and goals. On April 24th, the draft budget was due to the city manager and finance director, and another meeting on May 8th, and then the recommended proposed budget was provided to you on May 21st. But here's where we are now. A ton of work has led up to where we are right now, and we are really launching the city council budget deliberation process. And so before you on the screen are a list of 6 meetings, beginning tonight with our study session and the presentation of the proposed budget. Tomorrow, we will have an all-day budget retreat that will be like this setting, less than ideal, and will be virtual. And so it will be a challenge to have the type of robust engagement that we normally have when we go through the budget and have everybody in one room. But that meeting will begin at 10 a.m. It will be on Zoom and is a public meeting for everyone to see, as is all of these meetings. And so we anticipate, and the schedule has us going tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Next, on June 4th, we will have that City Council Strategic Initiative Retreat, where we will talk about your referrals and injects to the budget. On June 9th, we will have our first budget hearing, another study session where we will respond to any questions that we are not able to respond to today or tomorrow. And that meeting will begin at 7 p.m. We then will have a capital budget day, and that is on June 11th, where we will delve deep into the capital improvement budget. Capital improvement budget, it's all of our projects, not just general fund projects, but sewer projects, water projects, stormwater projects. We will talk not only about the current projects that are underway, their status. We will also talk about the projects that are recommended for funding, as well as the unmet needs that we do not have the capacity to fund. And then all of this marches to June 23rd, where the City Council will adopt a balanced budget, and that meeting begins at 7 p.m. So for the public, those are the dates. Please attend and participate in your democracy. Fiscal context, so everything is different. We all know that. COVID-19 has changed just about everything about our society. We had just over the weekend, Hertz filed for bankruptcy. We know JCPenney's filed for bankruptcy. We know that we have airport adjacent businesses that are struggling, as well as all of our other businesses that are struggling with the shelter in place. What we also know is that the effects of COVID-19 at this point are projected to last anywhere between 12 to 18 months and potentially longer. But tonight is really about talking and presenting the information of how that impacts us here. What is the impact that we are projecting to feel in our proposed budget for 2021? So a couple sort of foundational slides that I will go through, beginning with population and city staffing. The real point of this graph, and council has seen various versions of this, but the real point is to note the black line, which is there was a significant decrease in city staff during the Great Recession, and we are still not up to where we were, even though there has been moderate population growth or growth between 1999 to 2020 of 12.2%. And so this graph shows two different pieces of data. High level, there has been growth of 12% over the last 20 years in our city, but the city staffing level is actually not back to its height in 2003. And so that impacts everything we do. That impacts our ability to serve the community, but it is part of our reality. We have a number of principal employers. These will look very familiar. I will not spend the time to go through them all, but we should all note JCPenney's is up there, and we'll talk about that right now. So on the right-hand panel, you have the top 25 sales tax generators in the city of San Bruno in alphabetical order, not in order of their receipts. Highlighted in red, though, you have 3 that 2 of which we know are now out of business, and one recently filed for bankruptcy. And we do not have information on when and if they will reopen in Tan Fran. And so that's part of our fiscal context. It's 3 of our top 25 sales tax generators in the city, 2 of which close. One we know has tough times. And this does not show Sky Park, which didn't provide sales tax, but it did provide a parking tax. And so that's part of our fiscal context. The changing economy is having an impact on our sales tax. And we all know that during mid-years, we projected the closure of Sears, and that had an immediate impact to our current year 19-20 budget and our 2021 budget. That has been incorporated. In addition, due to COVID-19, we are projecting a 18% reduction in sales tax for this coming budget year, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that has a significant, approximately a $1.4 million impact on our revenue generation for next fiscal year. So what is our projected deficit? So our deficit represents 15% of expenditures, which is a significant, our expenditure base is 49 million, and our projected deficit is $8.2 million this year. That reflects a number of things. It unfortunately reflects a 40% drop in our hotel tax, also called the TOT, the transient occupancy tax. We all know the impact on hotels being virtually empty during the beginning part of the shelter in place. But we are projecting a 40% drop over the 12-month period for 2021. What I'll tell the council and the community is that is in line with other cities in San Mateo County and what is being projected. Some cities are projecting as high of a 66% drop. The unique makeup of our hotels is slightly different than our neighboring cities, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But our best projection is a 40% drop. Again, a 18% drop in sales tax, a 28% drop in our Measure G district sales tax. And you may be asking why. Why is the district sales tax dropping more than the regular sales tax? And that's because it's a district sales tax, and it actually applies to transactions differently. The regular sales tax is based on every transaction that is sales tax eligible pays the base sales tax rate, but only certain transactions pay the district sales tax. For example, if you buy a car and that car is going to be registered in San Bruno, you pay our district tax. But if you buy that car, even if you buy that car in San Bruno, but your place of residence where you register that car will be outside of San Bruno, you do not pay that district tax. It's actually a use and transactions tax. And there's a whole section of government code that explains what it applies to and what it doesn't. But at a top line summary, it acts differently. But we are projecting $2.9 million from that revenue source, where we had been projecting more than $4 million pre-COVID. Our recreation services revenues dropped 52%. Now that comes when you look at the totality of the budget with a drop in expenditures, because we will not be running a number of recreation programs, and a 28% drop in our senior programs. The revenue from senior programs, again, that comes with an associated drop in expenditures. And what the council and the public may remember is early during the recession, we unfortunately had to furlough approximately 66 part-time employees due to the cancellation of those programs. Recreation, library, senior programs throughout the community. Now, we will have, through tonight's presentation and tomorrow's workshop, a significant conversation about every fund that makes up our fiscal condition and our financial accounting system. But I did, in the beginning, want to provide the city council and the community with a highlight for what is the condition of our funds. And so our general fund, it's projected to have a significant deficit of 15%. And significant progress is needed to obtain fiscal sustainability. The good news is that we started that project, but part of our $8.2 million deficit is COVID-19, roughly 4 million, but roughly half is increase in other expenditures, largely personnel costs and contracts. And so we have a fiscal sustainability challenge here, and that is reflected in that $8.2 million shortfall. Stormwater, we talked a little bit about that in the presentation by the Lou Edwards Group and Godby Research. Our stormwater fund has challenges. It is projected to go negative in 2021. And the current parcel charges to fund the city's stormwater system does not cover all of the cost. And there are a number of regulatory trash capture devices and diversion of trash to the stormwater programs that we have to implement. And that is going to require subsidy to the general fund or additional parcel fees. And in addition, we have capital improvement projects that we do not have the ability to fund out of the stormwater fund. One of them is on Spyglass, where we have a pinch point in our stormwater network, and we've had prior flooding, and that project is being designed, and the estimated cost of that project is $1.5 million, and we do not have sufficient funds in that stormwater fund to cover that, and so we will be looking toward other general funds or sources to fund that, but it's a needed improvement. We have a number of replacement funds, be there for vehicles, equipment, technology. There are an insufficient amount of annual set-asides, which means that we do not always have the full amount set aside when that vehicle or that equipment needs to be replaced. And so a subsidy is required, either pulling money out of that fund, additional money that was allocated for other equipment or vehicles, or it requires a subsidy from the general fund. And so we need healthier replacement funds. Our insurance reserve fund, we will talk about in significant detail tomorrow. That fund is projected to have a ending balance of $500,000, and that is our fund for workers' comp, our workers' compensation claims, our self-insurance claims, and one other that unfortunately I'm blanking on right now. But just a high-level summary for those that are only going to see this presentation: an ending fund balance of $500,000 when for workers' comp claims we're self-insured for the first $750,000 is not sufficient. And so in that fund, ideally, we would have enough at a minimum to cover the self-insured retention of all of our self-insurance funds, and that is not currently the case. Facilities and Building Reserve Fund, there is approximately $5 million in that fund, and we know that our needed facility improvements today far exceed that. If we only look to Fire Station 52, that has an estimated replacement cost of $10 million, you can see that we do not have enough accumulated in that fund, and that there are significant improvements needed to that building, as well as a number of our other facilities. CityNet, we've talked a lot about that, and we will continue to talk a lot about that, even though we've made substantial progress this year to essentially stop digging the hole in the annual operating budget. There is still a projected hole in 1920 that is proposed to be rectified in 2021. But the longer term success of that enterprise really hinges on the fiber to the home project and a $14 million investment. A $13 million investment for that project on top of the $14 million that enterprise holds the general fund in a loan. Our general fund reserve balances, while they meet the policy target, they do not have available cash to meet the policy target because of the fiber to the home loan. And so our reserve funds are challenged. We've talked a lot about that. We'll have a number of slides on that. And it does pose a challenge in times like this, where we would ordinarily be relying heavily on our reserve funds. And as some of you may be hearing the strategies that other cities are implementing to resolve their shortfall, they're really looking towards their reserve funds because they have those rainy day funds. Unfortunately, we have limited available cash due to the CityNet Services loan. couple of bright sides in our financial condition are the water fund and the wastewater fund. Those are stable and sustainable, largely because this city council took the action to adopt the 5-year rate increases due to the deferred maintenance of our water and sewer infrastructure, and we have seen those projects all across the community, and we talked about those at a prior meeting. And then Measure G, the voter approved measure is an amazing revenue source in perpetuity to provide needed improvements to roads, maintain essential services like police, fire, and as well as youth programs and maintain parks. As I mentioned, the projected amount for 2020, 2021 is 2.9 million due to COVID-19, but a revenue source in perpetuity that will help with some of these challenges, but not all. I mentioned that because just our road deficit alone, we need to be spending about $6 million a year to get our PCI, our pavement condition index up to where it needs to be. And so even if we were to use all of the $4 billion on a regular year that Measure G is projected to bring in, we would still be 2 million short. And that's just sort of a way to think about the magnitude of our road challenge and some of our other needs. And so I know that this paints a fairly significant portrait of the challenges that are before us. I want to provide a couple other context slides for this. This slide provides a comparison of our general fund revenue to a few other cities in the county. And there's a lot of data here, but the main point on this slide is every city is unique. And how this economic recession is affecting us is different than it's going to affect Burlingame, for example, because one of the things we see on this slide is Burlingame has a larger share of their general fund revenue, just about 40% on transient occupancy tax. Ours is significantly less. And other cities have a higher share of property tax. Ours is significantly less. And so I wanted to show this just because people in the community may be seeing how other cities are addressing their fiscal challenge, but you really have to take a deeper look and see what is their revenue base and how is the reduction having an impact on their general fund. Next slide shows per capita. Important point here is that on a per capita basis, San Bruno brings in less revenue, significantly less, compared to a number of our peer cities in the county. In this presentation, the lowest, only second to Daly City. And so that's part of our fiscal context, that's part of our reality, that per capita revenue generation in San Bruno is less than our peer cities in the county. So there are no easy decisions before the city council. It was not a joyous thing to put together the proposed budget that is before you. And the task that you have is a challenging one, and know that I and the entire executive team recognizes that. And so there are difficult decisions to resolve our fiscal challenge this year. Defunding a lot of capital improvement projects where we have had money to set aside for capital improvement projects due to our fiscal condition. The proposed strategies has reducing that by $1.9 million. That's on top of the defunding of capital projects that we had to undertake during the midyear. There are a number of service level reductions that we'll talk about. There's a limited use of our reserves because of the limited available cash in our reserves. And again, we'll talk in detail about that. We're reducing set-asides for equipment replacements. Again, remember I said that we actually need to increase our set-asides for equipment replacement. Unfortunately, our financial context has us reducing those set-asides. We are freezing 13 vacant positions, police officers, firefighters, and a number of non-sworn staff, administrative and operating positions that will have an impact on operations. The city of San Bruno has not recovered from a staffing perspective since the Great Recession, and not having a position has a significant impact on services, and we'll talk about those. There is one personnel reduction of a field position, a senior code enforcement officer in this proposed budget. We are also recommending the use of Measure G to delay and delaying some road improvements, really to avoid future service and personnel reductions, really due to the significant fiscal context we find ourselves in this year, with $4 million of that deficit being generated by COVID-19. And then we are postponing progress on needed enhancements and unmet needs. So what are we doing about it? So the good news is that we launched a fiscal sustainability project as the council and members in the community that have been paying attention to some of these presentations, and we've taken a number of steps. Last year, a lot of work around Measure G, but also other revenue expenditure controls and a number of changes to renegotiate contracts. We've talked about those and all the wonderful work that the CityNet department did to renegotiate significant contracts, a number of the internal controls and cost-saving measures that were led by our finance director that we talked about in our prior presentations. Again, I don't want to go through all of that, but this is important to note that we are not beginning the road to fiscal sustainability. We've already been on this road. COVID-19 means that we need to amend it. This is a living, breathing project, and we are honestly amending it on the fly due to COVID-19 and the new challenge that is before us. So the next thing, fiscal sustainability. A core component is growing our revenue base. That should not be confused with increased taxes, or should not be looked at as growing the city's revenue base means that we are only looking toward increasing taxes and fees. Economic development is critical, as we all know. And one of the core city council priority focus areas is implementation of the transit corridors plan and economic development, and that equals growing our revenue base. And I think we've all said a number of times, we really have to grow ourselves out of this problem. We unfortunately can't just cut ourselves out of this problem or tax our way out of this problem. We have to grow our way out of this problem. And the good news is that we have significant development potential. And so the Community and Economic Development Director, Darcy Smith, tomorrow will go through some of these projects in detail, but I wanted to provide a few of them on the screen here, just so the City Council and the community can see that there are a number of projects in the development pipeline. Some have been approved and are under construction. For example, the Skyline Residential Project, 30 single-family homes and 40 multifamily teacher housing units, or Skyline College faculty housing units. Glenview Terrace is in the entitlement process. Mills Park will be before you. We just had a community meeting. I think it's all a blur, but about a week and a half ago, and staff is working to bring that before you in June of this calendar year, so just next month. We have 111 San Bruno that is going through the construction permit process. We have the Bay Hill specific plan and YouTube's request for an additional 2 million square feet of office space, a significant project that has been going forward, and we are scheduling a study session to talk about that community benefit package. And then we have Tan Fran and Sears that has been undergoing a significant effort to look at revitalization. And we know that Sears closed, but we have been in communications with Seritage, the company that manages, it's a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, that manages that property, and they will be coming forward with their reuse plan. And lastly, on this slide, we have 1000 San Mateo Avenue that was just before the City Council a few meetings ago, wanting to place a measure on the November ballot to increase the height above the 3 stories that is limited under Ordinance 1284 for a potential large reuse of that property. Next, I wanted to talk about economic development on our border. And so there was an article in the San Mateo Daily Journal today about a project just on our border. And that project is located in Millbrae, that is the El Rancho Inn. And there is currently a apartment building, 384 units that is proposed with a hotel. In addition, there are a number of projects in South San Francisco that are projected that are going through various stages of the development pipeline. There's the South Line project for over 2.5 million square feet of office space. There is the project at 410 Norr Avenue, just behind Lowe's. It's the old Century Theater site that is projected to be a 3 to 5 story mixed use complex with 342 residential units. And so we know development is around us and is occurring, and we have opportunities, and our neighboring municipalities are looking to develop sites along our border as well. So let's talk about the proposed general fund budget and the deficit reduction strategies. All in, we are a $180 million organization on an annual basis. That is all funds, sewer, water, general fund. Our general fund budget, as I mentioned, is $49 million. We have 265 FTEs and active and proposed capital projects, 102. Budget challenges that are before us. Some of these we've touched on, but of course, COVID-19, a significant backlog of deferred maintenance projects, rising personnel costs, health insurance, pension costs. We'll talk about that today. We have our collective bargaining groups expiring. All of our bargaining groups contracts will expire at the end of this year. So December 31st, 2020. In addition, we have 2 contracts that have expired, and we are negotiating those. We have our CityNet department, stormwater, needed personnel investment, IT infrastructure, pressures on the general fund. So revenues are 45.2 million, expenditures 53.4. That accounts for the $8.2 million general fund deficit. Let's step through these. Again, I went over these in a prior slide, but these are the revenue drops. I won't talk about them again. We have $4 billion in personnel cost and operating cost increases. We have that accounts for that part of that $8.2 million. An important statistic for the council to know is 75% of our general fund budget goes to personnel. We are an organization of people that provide services, and that statistic is typical for municipal agencies like ourselves. And built into this 2021 budget is $900,000 of increased CalPERS pension cost that is spread out over the bi-weekly payroll. And we will have a number of charts and graphs on that. Increased health benefit costs and only minor increases in supplies or contracts, frankly, that were absolutely necessary. And in some of our subsequent round of analysis, we reduced a number of line items within the budget. So what are the strategies that are before you? Because we need to adopt a balanced budget. They're listed here. The council has options. There is a total of $9.1 million of strategies that are being put before you. I will step through them right now at a high level and then go in moderate detail with subsequent detail tomorrow. CIP defunding. Various projects or finding an alternative source so that project can still occur, or a scope change in the project. There are a number of in and outs for those, but those total just under 1.6 million. Delaying filling 13 vacant positions, that is 1.7, almost 1.8 million. A personnel reduction of a field position, a senior code enforcement officer of 158,000. Various expenditure reductions totaling 107,000. Eliminate equipment annual allocation of 340,000. A transfer from into the general fund from other funds of 400,000. We'll talk about that. Again, use of Measure G to avoid further cuts to our public safety departments, police, fire, and park maintenance. General fund reserve using just under 600,000, fund balance 500,000, and various personnel cost reductions that are the subject of bargaining, totaling $1.7 million. So your staff here examined a number of strategies to come up with this list. We wanted to provide you a high-level view of those on this slide 31. I will not go through all of these because many of these actually made it into the strategies that are before you tonight. And so why don't we talk at a high level about what these strategies are. So a $200,000 reduction in our street light pole replacement program. So the items that are before you are the $1.569 million reductions to capital improvement projects. And so I just want to really step through these at a high level to give you a sense of the decisions that unfortunately are before us. And so it's reducing our street light pole replacement program by $200,000. Council will remember that there was an inventory done of our street poles, and a number of them are still needed for replacement. And we are reducing the general fund allocation by $200,000 and identifying another funding source for that. We are identifying another funding source for some ergonomic improvements at the police dispatch center and in our record center. Those total $72,000. These are proposed to be used with equitable transfer funds, also called asset forfeiture. We are proposing to defund the senior center parking lot improvements and research alternative funding sources. That is $92,000. We hope to utilize funds within the senior center bequest fund. So currently there is a balance of $750,000 in the senior center bequest fund. And so we will be bringing that project back at a later date with a recommendation to use the bequest funds. And we want to take that to the senior advisory board that is not meeting at this time. But that is a very needed improvement that we had planned to fund with general fund resources that now we are looking to use those bequest funds. And for the community, those bequest funds are donated to the San Bruno Senior Center by users of the Senior Center that include the Senior Center in their will. And so the total in that fund right now is $750,000. And we were actually just notified by a trustee of another donation. And so it's a normal process that the city goes through in working with the Senior Center and the families that represent the will or the trustee. We are defunding a Crestmore Slope stability project. As we all know, that there was a slide along San Bruno Avenue that needed to be fixed immediately. There was already a funded capital improvement project. And so these funds can be removed from that capital improvement project and put back into the capital reserve fund. We are recommending that they go to support the general fund operating. Reducing the scope of the Florida Avenue Park project by $900,000. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but the plan there is to seek grant funding for that project, but also leaving sufficient funds in that project to fund the $45,000 to finalize the plan. So we do have shovel-ready plans that we can use in our grant submittals, and also having the funds necessary to install irrigation, seed the park, and return it to the community as a open grass area. The work done by city staff and looking to do that and complete that this summer. And delaying $29,000 for stormwater trash capture devices. However, we do have $50,000 left in carry forward. Personnel impacts. So these total over $1.9 million. I will step through them at a high level. You will have city council before you, the police chief, the fire chief, and all the department heads tomorrow to give you an in-depth presentation on the impacts of all of these reductions in their department. But at a high level, there is 7 vacant positions in the police department that we are recommending that they are froze for the 2021 fiscal year. I won't go through the cost of all of them, but for example, the 4 police officer vacancies account for $600,000 of savings. The community service officer, $97,000. the dispatcher 125,000, and the police record clerk 105,000. There are significant implications for the freezing the vacant police positions. It will mean that we will have to pull officers from other assignments and assign them to patrol. Two examples of that is our one motor officer will go back to patrol, and that will leave us with a motor unit that has 0 officers due to our staffing. That it is common in a city of our size to have 4 motor officers. We currently have 1 field position, but with freezing these vacant officer positions, there is a sort of scale down effect in order to meet minimum staffings. It also means that we will adjust how we serve Tan Fran Mall, and the officers that are assigned to Tan Fran will also be responsible for patrol duties as well. Freezing 2 vacant firefighter positions, that accounts for a little over $350,000 to freeze those vacant firefighter positions. We will be able to meet minimum staffings, but as is the case today, without those positions, there is a challenge to meet, accommodate requests for sick time, injuries, and we essentially have to use overtime because we do not have those positions. And so they're currently vacant. There will be staffing implications by holding them vacant, and we have within the budget maintained the overtime budget to account for that. But we do think that it is a viable budget reduction strategy to reduce that staffing. Our Public Works Department, 1 civil engineer position, a savings of $155,000. A community economic development, 2 positions. Council will recall that these 2 positions were recommended for funding last fiscal year. Unfortunately, due to budget and financial challenges, they were not budgeted for the full year, but budgeted to come online in January of 2020. They were not filled when COVID-19 came upon us. And so we are recommending that those 2 positions be held vacant. It's a total of just under $237,000 for both of those positions. City net, not general fund, but holding a vacant technician position of $117,000, and the reduction of 1 senior code enforcement officer of $158,000. Council will remember that we recently increased staffing in that unit from 2 code enforcement officers to 3 code enforcement officers, and this will be returning to that prior staffing level. A number of changes in the police department for reducing operating expenses. This is reducing backgrounds because we're holding those positions vacant, breach kits, emergency equipment, uniforms for our SWAT personnel because they purchased uniforms last year, and so we will not need that minor allocation, but it's a total budgetary savings of $80,000. In the fire department, another reduction of $27,000, reducing communications that we are looking to fund with asset forfeiture. A good note of reducing fuel and oil line item, because we have 2 new trucks and they are actually proving to be what the manufacturer said, because they have a idle mitigation system and they're burning less fuel and oil. And because they run so much, we're actually seeing that in our budget and can bring down that line item by a few $1,000s. Next up is a category that amounts to just under $3 million of projected strategies. And these are what we call fund transfers. So it's transferring money that was in the general fund or was budgeted to be expended from the general fund to another fund. The first item is, again, in the police department, $200,000 to use equitable sharing funds, also again called asset forfeiture. to fund the position, the police officer position that is assigned to the DEA Airport Task Force. That position does really important work, working in collaboration with not just the airport, but other regional agencies. And we do receive asset forfeiture funds from that. We currently have a balance of just under $1 million in that account, and we are projecting to use those funds for a number of items in this budget, $200,000 for this item. Increase money for cops, about $100,000 for a cops grant to be used to offset general fund costs, transferring gas tax that can be used for operating expenditures in the streets program by $100,000. Again, the use of Measure G, $2 million of the $2.9 million that we are projecting to receive this year, and utilizing just under $600,000 of our reserve. There's also a number of changes that I think the council and the community should be very aware of. So the proposed budget that you have before you also includes a number of changes to our community services programs. One is aquatics as a initial cost saving measure, not brought on by a subsequent review, but one thing that we built into the budget due to COVID-19 is not returning our aquatics program in the this budget year, 2021. Now, beginning in January, our pool was scheduled to go offline due to the construction of the new aquatic and rec center, and due to COVID-19, it's unclear when the aquatics program would be able to restart, and that has a built-in savings of $120,000. We know that a number of people in the community use the pool, and we're looking for at least some use before it closed for the season. But unfortunately, due to financial challenges, that is not included in the budget. After school programs are not included in the budget, and the subsidy for that program. The San Bruno Park School District has decided to enter into a contract with the YMCA that will provide after school programs. And so we are in the process of transitioning that program fully over to the YMCA. Reduce recreation and senior activities and all large events such as Community Day due to the implications of COVID-19 in this budget. There will be no new police or other vehicle requests, and multiple operating reductions to balance the budget are already built into the budget, not reflected in the strategies that are before you, and a number of operating changes where we have the building and custodial division moving to public works, code enforcement moving to the police department, a restructure of the command staff that was on your consent calendar tonight, and information technology division moved to CityNet Services earlier this year with the vacancy of our assistant city manager position. So high level summary, and we will go over this, and I know there'll be questions. So what's the good news? The good news is that we have Measure G, and the voters said yes to provide the city with additional revenue to support some of our challenges. And we had really planned for that $4 million, frankly, to largely go to roads. And pre-COVID-19, the plan was not to allocate Measure G funds through this budget process. The plan was always to establish the Measure G oversight committee that is advisory to the city council and plan out a list of road projects and other important needs to the community. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has changed everything, and we are recommending delaying those expenditures due to the need to avoid cuts to public safety and our park programs, as well as park maintenance programs. And so it is $2 million of the 2.9. I believe that our fiscal condition warrants it, and it's before the budget, before you tonight in the proposed budget. We have significant deficit reduction strategies that have been identified. So we can adopt a balanced budget. It will be tough. There are no easy decisions. Again, our fiscal sustainability project has already been started, and we talked about the development pipeline. The bad news is too many of the funds are going in the wrong direction, and we have declining fund balances. And there are also many unfunded priorities. We have our deficit in our city net department, and we have our stormwater deficit again that is unable to meet the needs of that fund nor the needs of the capital improvement projects for those funds. And we have challenges with our collective bargaining that is set to begin with our contracts that are expiring at the end of this calendar year. We have rising personnel costs, and we know we will have a sluggish economy. And so with that, I will be back up a little later to answer questions, but why don't I turn it over to Keith DeMartini, our finance director.
Mr. DeMartini.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Keith DeMartini, your Finance Director, and I want to focus my time with you this evening on providing another set of slides regarding the high-level summary of the city's fiscal condition leading up to the budget development process, as well as speaking mostly tonight before you in regards to our revenue sources and how the changes are being projected in the upcoming fiscal year, as well as a number of revenue enhancement strategies that have currently already been completed or some of those that are in the works as of right now. So let me start with some additional slides to complement the city manager's slides into the city's fiscal condition. Staff conducted an assessment to sort of evaluate where we are in the current fiscal year leading up to the proposed 2021 budget cycle. And as the city manager mentioned, in regards to the general fund, this box on the left-hand side, there is a significant deficit that represents about 15% of the annual operating budget. Staff has identified and has folded in the budget balancing strategies in the proposed budget so that you see a balanced budget. The economic impacts of COVID are substantial, and staff do anticipate that the impacts from COVID will be felt in the city's budget for years to come. Budget balancing strategies will likely be required, not just in the 2021 budget cycle, but likely in multiple years thereafter in order to achieve a balanced budget as well. And you will see that in our forecasting model that was presented in the city manager's letter as well. Staff will continue to evaluate fiscal sustainability efforts under the Comprehensive Fiscal Sustainability Project and various revenue enhancements as well. And it's important to note, as the city manager mentioned, that the ongoing revenue that the city will obtain from implementing development projects will help balance the budget in the years to come as well. City manager talked about our reserves. We will likely meet all of our reserve targets by the end of this current fiscal year. However, in the fiscal year 2021 budget, we will likely be falling short on most of the general fund reserves, primarily due to the transfer from the reserve into the general fund to meet the balanced budget. But it's important to note here that the most significant strain on the city's reserves has been and will continue to be the loan from the City Net Services Department due to the reduction of available cash that we have to meet those reserves. And the city manager talked a lot about Measure G already, so I'll just go on to the next slide. This slide summarizes the fiscal condition for the 4 enterprise funds. The water and the wastewater funds are healthy fiscally. They have adequate reserves on hand, primarily from the rate increases that the council approved a few years ago. And there are adequate balances that the city is currently investing in a very robust capital improvement program in both of those areas. The stormwater fund, however, has its challenges. The annual property tax assessment on property owners for most properties in San Bruno is about $46 a year. That falls short of funding not only the required operating expenses for the enterprise, but it's not enough to cover any capital improvements in the city's stormwater system. And so there is a need to identify additional funding to continue to meet our stormwater needs. And then also with the City Net Services Department, substantial improvement has occurred over the past year to achieve fiscal stability, but there continues to be this large negative fund balance with no dedicated funding identified currently for the much needed citywide fiber to the home project. And then the final fiscal condition slide is in regards to our internal service departments and our equipment reserve in our CIP program. As the city manager mentioned, we are meeting our reserve targets for our internal service departments. However, there continues to be inadequate funding available for vehicles and equipment purchases due to the budget balancing strategy that the council agreed to take in the current fiscal year, and that staff is proposing to continue to take in the 2021 budget cycle, which is to not fund our equipment reserve at all within this current year and into the following fiscal year. So the net effect of that is our equipment reserve continues to not have adequate resources to cover eventual equipment and vehicle replacements. Our self-insurance fund, the city manager spoke about that as well. As far as our capital improvement program, again, we are moving forward on our robust water and wastewater programs, primarily due to leveraging the debt that the city issued back in 2017 to expedite many of those projects. But there continues to be many unfunded or underfunded priority projects that staff will detail in the upcoming study sessions with you in the next few weeks. So with that, I want to spend some time focusing on the general fund and particularly on the revenues. I want to first focus and explain how we present our 5-year financial forecast. And it's just really important that we continue to do this. Last year was the first year that the city implemented a long-range financial forecast for all of its major funds. It's a government best practice. It helps facilitate long-range planning for all of our funds. And this year we focused on refining our methodology and really making sure that we understand the impacts from COVID, not just in the 2021 budget cycle, but the effects thereafter. So this graph here shows you in the blue columns what the projected ending fund balance is projected to be in the general fund for the upcoming 5-year financial forecast planning cycle. And the dotted black line shows you the projected expenditures, and the green line shows you the revenues. The major takeaways here on this slide is that, as you can see, the expenditures in the 3 years following the 2021 budget cycle are projected to be more than the revenues that are projected to come in. And that indicates the need for continuing to identify budget balancing strategies to balance the budget thereafter. This does assume a very conservative assumption of revenue that we would achieve from development projects coming online, as well as the additional expenditure increases from personnel costs related to pension and healthcare and other fringe benefits as well. Overall general funds summary. In the Q3 financial update report that staff delivered to you at the last city council meeting, we articulated that we project the ending fund balance in the current fiscal year 1920, to be about $1.5 million. Again, that meets the reserve target in the city's reserve policy. But unfortunately, next year's proposed budget in 2021, including all of the budget balancing strategies that the city manager had just presented, still results in a modest deficit of just over $500,000, which will then result in an ending fund balance by the end of next fiscal year of about $1 million, which is about $500,000 less than the reserve target calls for in our reserve policy. And so we'll step through the revenues and expenditures that make up these numbers in the coming slides here. These pie charts should be familiar. We present these at every quarterly financial update. Again, most of our revenues do come from taxes, which I'll walk through each one in a little bit of detail in the next few slides. And a majority of our general fund sources go to pay for the public safety function, primarily police and fire, at more than half of the general fund expenditures. So moving on to our revenue sources that make up the $48.8 million in 2021. Most of our revenue in the general fund does come from taxes, and I'll walk through each of those individually on the next slide. The major takeaway on this slide, though, is, as you can see, a majority of these revenue sources will show a fairly substantial decline year over year. Taxes is projected to go down about 11%. Our use of money and property interest income, and our rental income on city facilities is down 14%. Departmental revenues, as the city manager talked about earlier, overall is going to be down about 28%. You will see the allocation and other revenues line has a substantial increase, and that is where we record the transfer in to the general fund from the various other funds, like Measure G or like gas tax. That's where we show the infusion of cash coming into the general fund to help us balance the budget at the end of the day. Overall, general fund revenues are projected to be down about 8% after all of those budget balancing strategies have been implemented. So just peeling the onion one level down, these are the major tax revenue sources for the city's general fund. Starting with property tax will be about flat year over year. Sales tax, as mentioned earlier, down 18%, transient occupancy tax, so on and so forth. As you can see, our major tax revenue sources will experience substantial decline, what is being projected into next fiscal year. Talking about property tax for a moment, this graphic shows what portion of every dollar remitted to the county for a resident's property tax bill, what portion of that dollar actually comes back to the city of San Bruno for our general fund operations. And on the bottom, highlighted in red, shows you that only 15 cents for every dollar that gets remitted comes back to the city. A majority of property tax dollars goes to fund public education systems in and throughout the state and the county. This graph here was a slide that staff presented to you during a presentation we made in regards to the impacts related to COVID. And what it showed was that during the last two recessions that were experienced over the last 15 or 20 years, the first one being the 9/11 recession, and the second one being the Great Recession, San Bruno's assessed values for property did show a decline. The 9/11 recession lasted about a year, and the recession following the Great Recession lasted a couple years. And so time will tell, and the data will tell how significant the COVID-19 shelter in place economic impacts is going to have on San Bruno's assessed values, which directly impacts the amount of property tax revenue that we get. Moving on to sales tax, this graphic shows an example of someone purchasing something for $75 in San Bruno. They'll pay $7.31 of sales tax, and of that amount, about 15% of that paid comes back to the city of San Bruno. And that amount does include the half-cent sales tax related to Measure G, the district sales tax. This pie chart shows the different types of industries that generate sales tax revenue for the city of San Bruno. And the major takeaway on this slide really is that restaurants and hotels, autos and transportation, and sort of the biggest pieces of the pie here were significantly impacted from the shelter in place. And so again, time will tell how those businesses ramp back up once those orders are fully lifted and we can generate some more normal sales tax activity in the years to come. This table here shows the percent decline in those major sales tax generating industries year over year, pretty much. And the middle column shows that a majority of these industries are projected to experience a substantial decline in their economic activity year over year. Autos and transportation will be cut in half. Building and construction activities cut close to half. You'll see that there are some industries that are projected to actually grow during this time, primarily the state and county pools. And that's primarily from online sales, from online platforms like Walmart.com or Amazon. Those areas are expected to actually increase through the pandemic. So moving on to our transient occupancy tax. There are 12 hotel operators in San Bruno, a little over 600 rooms in total. And currently the adopted TOT rate for the hotel operators is about 12%. is what people pay to stay at a hotel. As the city manager indicated, staff are projecting a significant decline in occupancy, which directly means less TOT revenue for the city, and we're projecting about a 40% decline. Many industry experts had projected around 75 to 90% occupancy decline in the current quarter that we're in right now, with very, very slow projected recovery through the entire fiscal year of 2021. And again, that's primarily due to significant business travel reductions that will have long-lasting implications on that revenue stream. It's important to note that, the TOT rate in San Bruno at 12% is lower than some of the other neighboring cities in San Mateo County as well. Our next major general fund tax revenue source is our business license tax. And this revenue is mostly collected at the very, very beginning of the fiscal year with the annual recertification process. There is likely a temporary reduction with some of the business license activity due to some businesses being closed and having lower gross receipts. There is an assumption of some businesses actually having additional activity, like grocery stores or some other retailers that experienced some increased activity during shelter in place. But overall, this revenue source for the city is projected to decline about 31% year over year, and that's primarily attributable to the closure of Sky Park, the airport parking facility off of San Mateo Avenue. So now that I've gone through the major general fund revenue sources, I did want to take some time and articulate many of the revenue enhancement strategies that staff have currently implemented under the direction of the City Council, and then also articulate those efforts that are underway, because there is quite a lot of work currently being done. First, I'll talk about the citywide development impact fee program, which went into effect about a year ago on May 1st, 2019. Again, a development impact fee is a one-time fee that a developer will pay, and that represents their proportional share of what it will take to enhance infrastructure improvements to serve the growth from the development. This will be a vital funding source for the city in years to come to help implement capital improvements. To date, we collected about $110,000 so far, but the city will see significant increases in this revenue source in the coming years when much larger development projects are implemented. Next is the Measure G district sales tax that the voters approved last November. And the city manager spoke about this already, but this will prove to be a vital funding source for city enhancements for many years to come. This table here summarizes in the proposed budget how staff are recommending to City Council how to use the Measure G funds. Just to summarize here, first, about $2 million is projected to be transferred to the general fund to avoid any future cuts to police, fire, and park maintenance operations. Next, there's a request to have $150,000 fund the street sign replacement program. The next one is $44,000 to help fund the parks manager enhancement request. And then the one after that, about $205,000. Staff are proposing to use Measure G funds to replace the HVAC and repair the roof at the police headquarters building. And then finally, $200,000 is proposed to be used for the street light pole replacement program. And after all of those items, if they were to be approved, it would still leave an ending fund balance in the Measure G fund of over $400,000 to be used for future efforts. So moving on to the master fee schedule. The master fee schedule is typically presented to the City Council annually during the budget process. At this time, staff are not recommending any changes, and that's primarily because staff is currently working to complete the fee study project that had been underway for quite some time, where staff is comprehensively reviewing the over 700 individual city fees to ensure that they achieve adequate cost recovery. And I've highlighted a couple fees and departments particularly here, where a lot of work is being done to rebaseline those fees. Just in an overview, the city's fee study project will include many of the bullets here listed. I won't go over all these in detail, but effectively, staff is taking a comprehensive review of all the fees, making sure that they're set at the right level, achieving full cost recovery for the services that the city provides for these types of services, that it's a legally defensible process, that we are able to update and maintain these fees at least on an annual basis, and that we can make sure that they stay on pace with inflation that occurs annually. This is a slide here that summarizes the scope of the fee study project. This was a presentation that staff delivered to council back in January. For the over 700 fees, what the current cost recovery is for all of the fees in these departments listed here. And as you can see, for the building division and for the planning division, the current cost recovery on those fees is far below what is the industry standard. So for building, they're only recovering 28% of what it actually costs for staff to review a building permit. And after a city conducts their fee study, typically post fee study, their fees would be set anywhere between 90 to 100%. So it's critical that we proceed and see this project through implementation so that our fees do in fact obtain full cost recovery. And then finally, there was a presentation earlier this evening that our consultants presented in regards to the community priority survey. So I won't go into detail here, but it was clear that most residents were satisfied with the job that the city was doing to address the impacts from COVID and the services that were being offered. And the largest problem that they told us facing the city was the coronavirus response and the recovery needs, which is playing itself out in how the budget is being presented for 2021. And they identified, the respondents identified major areas where they would like to see continued enhancements in street repair, supporting families and in financial transition, services to local businesses, and maintaining neighborhood police patrols for safety. Again, there's work that staff will do based on City Council's feedback to consider a potential TOT rate increase from 12% up to 14%. There are a number of cities in San Mateo County that currently have a TOT rate greater than 12%, and there are many in Santa Clara County that have rates greater than 12% as well. It is projected pre-COVID that a rate increase from 12% to about 14% would generate approximately $500,000 annually. But sort of post-COVID, that amount would actually be projected down temporarily until the TOT revenue source rebounds. And then finally, the other major potential revenue enhancement that staff could research under City Council's guidance would be to revisit the stormwater special assessment. As we talked about earlier, the special assessment is far from adequate from not only maintaining the operating expense budget, but any capital improvements. And so it would be important to identify an augmentation to the existing funding source to make sure that that enterprise fund is fiscally sound. And with that, I will turn it back over to the city manager to wrap up before we take your questions this evening.
So the night is young, so I will not say much more other than reviewing the deficit of 8.2 million. And we're here for questions, and I will leave this slide up for our conversation.
Okay, thank you. I think at this time with council, I'm going to ask for if there's any public comment or questions. I didn't see any, but I'll just double check. Seeing none, unless I'm corrected, we'll bring it back to council. Questions of council? Well, again, we are meeting tomorrow from 10 to 5, and I know that will get more into, if I want to say it, into the minutia of things. And this was a broad stroke and brush of everything that's occurring. So to my colleagues, questions? I'm seeing none.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, Marty?
being that we're going to meet all day on this tomorrow and it's 10:47, I did send in some questions earlier today. I think this is very serious news, and that I'm okay with moving forward with the questions for tomorrow.
Okay.
I otherwise we could be here for a long time. So that's what I'm thinking is probably best of use of our time, unless any of my colleagues want to ask a question.
Yeah, they're welcome
I
to
can
ask
wait till
questions.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I was hoping that we go to each of us, and Marty, I appreciate what you just said, and I'm not going to go back and forth. We're going to do it once, say what you need to say, and then we'll move on, because like you said, we're 10 to 5 tomorrow. Laura?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I just want to compliment Jovan and Keith for just a really, I mean, I know you guys have been buried in this for probably several months, but the presentations are excellent, and the information you provided, and it really does help you you paint a picture, although not a good picture, but we're making strides and we're moving in the right direction. And I too will save my comments and questions for tomorrow.
Linda?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have some very serious reservations around the use of the Measure G funds. I know we're going to have a full conversation tomorrow, but I just want to reiterate what I said at the last meeting, because there's been no change since then, which is that we do have enough people to be interviewed. Those interviews were canceled by, it is unknown why they were canceled. It's unclear why we haven't moved forward with an oversight committee. And I feel uncomfortable spending a cent of that Measure G money without having that oversight committee in place. So with that, I will leave any further comments till tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, Michael? Michael, anything for you? You're muted.
I was muted. Yeah, I
No
just wanted
worries.
to echo what Laura said. You know, compliments to staff for a really well put together presentation. It's clear that a lot of time and effort went into this, and all of the you know, the reductions and the methods that are going into this. It's I know it's been a lot of work, and while it's not great news, at least there is a path forward. So definitely appreciate the work that went into it, and I'll reserve any further comments till tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have several questions. I'm kidding, guys. I also had some questions, but that I've asked and that can wait until tomorrow as well. It's a lot of information, but certainly we'll keep it fresh for tomorrow when we get more into each department, which I believe this is now the second time that we will have done a all day to really focus and get into all elements of the budget. And this will be a challenging one. So with that, city manager or finance director, is there anything else on this topic?
No, thank you. Look forward to being with you again at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay. And then if you could remove the presentation. Thank you. All right, let's move on to item 8, comments from council members. If you turn your mic off, I'll assume you want to talk. If I don't see your red mic come off, then I'll assume you don't. Linda.
Oh, so I just wanted to follow up on an email that I had sent a couple weeks ago regarding the possibility of closing San Mateo Avenue and allowing for restaurants to go on the street. I don't know what that possibility looks like, and I hadn't received a response. So just if we could get an update on what that possibility would be. And then I mentioned this earlier because it's been brought up, I think, every time Florida Park has been brought up. But regarding the cost of potential lawsuits, I think that the item in particular was divisive for the community that lives around Florida Park. And I think that we're either looking to collaborate and get everybody unified behind this new vision, or we're looking to continue to bring up this issue that really divided the community around this potential lawsuit. And if that's going to be the precedent that the city sets, then I think we need to have the potential legal costs, outside consulting costs on every item that comes before us. Regarding, I already stated the interview sessions for Measure G. It'd be really good to understand where we are, why there's been such a delay, and why the interviews that had been scheduled with all the council were canceled. And I think on a highlight, just welcoming the San Bruno Park School District did hire a new superintendent, Mr. Espinoza. And so we're really excited to have a new superintendent in San Bruno, and hopefully we all welcome him with open arms. And that I loved Michael Salazar's background tonight with the graduating class of 2020. So thanks for having that. And hopefully we're able to do something at the city council level for the graduating class. Thank you.
Okay, Marty.
Yeah, I wanted to, those are great ideas, Linda. I would like to see the options and how we could further support our businesses. Other cities are looking into opening their downtown to increase the outdoor shopping experience. That may get a little tough here in San Bruno when we get our winds, but because it can get pretty windy. But it'd be interesting to hear staff's thoughts on that with the Chamber of Commerce and the businesses downtown, Bay Hill, elsewhere. I wanted to touch on just the reminder of COVID-19. I know everybody's tired of hearing about it, but just because you're going to have a party and it's just family, you're taking a big risk, okay? And you're risking infecting others. If you feel well, that's great, but you can carry COVID without knowing it. And you don't want to be second guessing yourself or regretting going in something because you thought it was safe, because the health officer said it's not safe. So it's extremely difficult when you want to see your parents and see your family and celebrate important things, but it's more important to be careful. So I just wanted to stress that, because I got invited to a party and I was like, you know what? I'm not going in. I dropped off my gift and that was it. It's like, well, come on in, it's only family. And it's kind of like, no, that's not the right thing to do. So just bear that in mind. It isn't safe. You're taking a big risk and you don't want to live your life with regrets. So that's my message. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see Laura.
Oh, sorry, I've had my hand raised. So a couple things. So tonight earlier on, there were some comments, public comments regarding the Sweeney Ridge and Malaga Road. I don't know what it takes, something like that takes to be able to allow a group of people to sort of adopt that and try to make some changes. So I definitely am interested in something like that in the future. So I appreciate those comments. I also appreciate the comments from residents about keeping the Zoom meetings. I think that getting public engagement and getting people to, from their homes, be able to log into meetings, I think is pretty amazing and awesome. I'd like to, as a council, eventually get back together and not have that same situation. And then finally, I guess I'm confused on the process, and we talked about this off and on several occasions about council processes, right? I want to recommend tonight, that I want to have elephants down at San Bruno Park and expect to get a response back from staff next week or next council meeting. So I think there needs to be a succinct process that we're all clear with. And I thought what it was as a council member, I can request to say, hey, can we have this added back as an agenda item on next week's council under council comments? And then we can vote on it as a council, whether or not we want to move that forward. So I think we keep getting off topic. Hey, and Linda, you made a comment about the Recology contract, and I want to have these items brought back and reviewed. And that's all great and everything, but with so many priorities, I want to make sure we review things, and every little request that we have takes time out of staff. And right now, I think there's some critical things. I don't mind postponing something like that to later, to maybe next year, right? Or because I think that there's some really critical things. So I want to get back to a process and make sure we're all succinct, and that I feel like my voice can be heard on issues I want to bring forward, and that we agree or disagree as a council to move forward with those items.
Okay, thank you. And it's we can't discuss the item, it's not agendized.
Right.
Michael, nothing, or go ahead. Did you have any comments? No? Okay. So two things just for myself, because I know everybody wants to see each other early in the morning. Two things. This month of May, I was at the Park and Recreation Commission meeting, technically virtual, of course. And it was also to acknowledge David Nigel. David Nigel, this month, it makes 50 years that he has served this community in the capacity of a Park and Rec Commissioner. And he's done beyond through the state and scholarships and everything else. But it was to take the opportunity with the commission there to acknowledge, applaud, give him a standing ovation, and thank him for his continued deep love, respect, and admiration for the community. Lastly, the thing that we sometimes hate to say, but we always wish the person the very best, is our Community Services Director, Joanne. Joanne will be departing. Her last day technically is the 31st. She will be with us tomorrow, of course, and she is the director. Joanne, for all the time that I have known her, from when she worked at the Recreation Center as a rec leader, to the spirit and passion she has had for this community, parents, her mother especially, that I know it's been, we wish her the best. And I know personally that it's been challenging and hard for her to make this transition to Cupertino. But I know she will succeed and she will do well. She has the dedication, the spirit, the talent, the enthusiasm. She has been great in the EOC for us, and she's been great for San Bruno. This has been a dream job, and she may be not employed by the city of San Bruno, but I know her heart will always be with the city of San Bruno, and her family have added to that heart of this city. And I know, Joanne, it is not goodbye, for there are times we will see you at various events and functions in our community. So on behalf of this community, on behalf of the City Council and its residents, we thank you for all that you have done over the decades of service to this community in one way or the other, and what you will continue on to do. Our best wishes and our many thanks. With that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn to the next regular scheduled council meeting, which will be held on June 9th, 2020, 7 o'clock. We will see you all tomorrow morning. Good night.
Good night.